Panel 7, I guess we've got some competition. If I remember right, KTVQ is beginning a special on our overcrowded jail situation, I think at 5:30 today. So if you're watching live, we'll understand if you flip over to watch that. So anyway, this is a work session for the Billings City Council. Our procedures are a little more informal than our regular business meetings. We've got 3 items on our agenda tonight. There's a copy back there of the agenda if anybody has one. We'll have an opportunity for public comment after each one of these items. But at the very beginning of our meeting, we'd like to give people an opportunity to make public comment on any item that's not on the agenda, or if you've got to leave, even an item on the agenda. If you've got something to say on an item on the agenda and you don't have to leave, though, we would encourage you to wait till you've heard the presentations and those comments can be consolidated. So before we move on to take that public comment, Chris, anything before we go to public comment on all items?
I don't, Mayor. If you'd give me an opportunity to kick things off when we get to item 1, with our busy agenda, Perfect. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, we'll do that. Then this is an opportunity then for public comment on anything not on our agenda, or again, that's on our agenda if you can't wait until we get to that item. Is there anybody who would like to comment, either with us in person or online? Mr. Dunn.
Before my time starts, I was going to give Ms. Shaw an opportunity to answer my question about the holding in the beds at the gym. Would I do that now, or would you like to answer my question afterwards?
And Councilmember Shaw, you can choose to, whatever your pleasure is, or not. Deal with it later, whatever your pleasure is.
I would say we don't normally engage in this kind of back and forth during public comment, I think for good reason. So if you would like to reach out to me, like anybody can, you're welcome to email me, and I'd be happy to get you information.
Very good, and that's not uncommon at all, but go ahead.
So I can ask council members questions and expect an answer.
We would hope that if it's a simple, straightforward question, we could get you an answer at some point, but in these meetings, we generally like to get the comments without having a dialogue that may go on for a long time.
Wesley Dunn, 832 Dorothy Lane. I tried to jot down some stuff last time I was here, but I think speaking from the heart when I come up here is better. I don't really talk from a piece of paper and I don't comment, but I will keep an eye on my clock. So giving credit where credit's due. Our Sergeant Stovall came to the house and handled the situation very well, with an explosive / firework incident that happened at our house 3 or 4 weeks ago. I want to commend him. He needs a raise. He's a good sergeant. He went above and beyond to serve justice. So thank you for that. Officer Simpson also needs to be recognized. We had a situation where him and Officer Donovan, am I correct about Donovan? Yeah. Had to respond on the street. Officer Simpson conducted himself very well. He also is an outstanding officer. I say that his job is to serve and protect. He also needs a raise. He's doing a good job. And to Miss Jennifer here, Miss Owens, credit. I'm going to give you credit for tabling something that I'm going to talk about here in just 1 second. Mike, I would like to talk to you real quick about something. We talk about public safety and the mill levy that was passed and the marijuana money. You had a couple. I guess you said, "Why are you here?" And they said, "Well, we're here. Billings is giving away free money." And well, I believe Mr. Neese and Ms. Jennifer Owens wanted to table that for further discussion, but it just don't make any sense, Mike, that you would vote on that to give the homeless shelter more free money at the time. Somebody already told you that they're coming here because Billings is giving free money, but then you vote to give it to them. That just does not make any sense. I'll remind you, Mike, I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to do a job. don't need your vote, but I think you need the citizens' vote. So when they see that, you talk about why are homeless people coming here? Well, Billings is giving out free money, but then you vote to give them my money, the citizens' money. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're done, Dorothy Lane. The situation he was talking about where the officers had to come, we'll speak about that next time, but I would like to let you know that in dealing with that situation, I met the neighbor of the house that I was at, and she recognized us from what we've been doing and told us that she was also contacting the police for the same reasons we were. Prostitution, sex trafficking, all the things we've been calling about. This woman lives down Dorothy, 2nd Street in on Jordan. She has no visibility of this house, but this is what our neighborhood knows is going on, and our calls were called ambiguous. And we were made to sound like we were lying. So it really hit my heart that this woman wanted to let me know that she was also calling. Her children are not allowed to walk near our house, and they go to school with my daughter. So there's no hanging out near our house. They have to go down there. That's sad when you can't play in front of your house or up and down the street. So I wanted to make note of that. I also wanted to say that I saw that Chris is capable of making an apology, but yet my husband and I still have not received one. I'm not sure if that's because you're afraid to admit fault by apologizing, like because a lawsuit may ensue, but I don't feel that it's okay to apologize to some people for wrongdoings that you did clearly in front of everyone, and then not apologize for other wrongdoings that you did. Neither one of them. I also just wanted to give you guys a little bit of back history, why I messed up when I speak a lot. 7 years ago, I was diagnosed with aphasia, and I could not speak. I could look at a pen, but I could not tell you it was a pen. I had to learn how to re-speak. As a single mother, going to school with 3 jobs, and in college, I had to learn how to speak again. So when I mess up, please just give me a little bit of forgiveness there. I have trouble still finding some words. I mess up on a daily, but that's it. I just wanted to say that today.
Great. Thank you. No, you did doing great. Any other public comment on any item not on our agenda or on the agenda if you've got to leave? And nobody online, Kevin? Okay, so then we'll close the public comment period and move into our first item, the Multi-Generational Recreation Center. I'm going to hand it to our city administrator, Chris Kulski, to kind of tee this one up and tell us what we're looking at. Council, I hope I'm not jinxing it, but we've only got these 2 items, and let's try to see if we can wrap up before our 7:30 break time. Chris.
So Mayor and Council, I don't want to steal any thunder from the presentations that are coming, but just a reminder, obviously, this has been in the works for many, many years, predates several of us, including myself, at this table. I think for some, they might not make what we have and believe is the case. So as public safety remains our top priority, having activities for families and kids to do things is a part of improving, I think, the health of our community. I never appreciated just how much public health and public safety are intertwined. But the conversations we're going to have tonight about investments in our quality of life, I want to just make sure are not seen in the context exclusively of, wouldn't it be great to have all these wonderful amenities? Yes, that is a part of the conversation, but it's also, I think, a part of the conversation that if you look across this country and in our own community, many, many decades ago, investments like these were considered a part of a healthy, vibrant city. And I think that's because they were thinking about very thoughtfully, what do our kids, what do our families, what do our single moms, what things can people do to grow, learn, and become extremely productive, active citizens in our community. So with that, just want to turn it over. I don't know if it's Mike, straight to all right, straight to Dusty, A&E, and the work that they have been doing in this next phase of, an extremely exciting multi-generational recreation facility. It's been talked about for many, many years in Billings. So, Dusty, I'll turn it over to you.
Wonderful, thank you. Mayor and Council, it's good to be here in front of you all again on this exciting project. So before we start, I'm gonna, just on the Zoom, we have a few of our other team members here. I'm gonna have them just do a quick introduction and their role on the project. Kevin, do you wanna start?
And Dusty, introduce yourself. I know you need no introduction, but just in case.
So Dusty Eaton with A&E Design. I've been leading this project locally, and we have assembled a team of consultants and resources that go beyond Billings for national expertise on recreational center planning. So Kevin, do you want to start?
Absolutely. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. So good evening. Kevin Armstrong with Parker Rinker CCAT Architecture. We're a firm that specializes in the design of recreation and community and sports facilities. And so we do this across the nation. We've completed over 300 recreation projects nationally and are known for doing this type of work. And so just excited to present this to you all this evening. Also, just to assist, calling in as an attendee is Ryan Murray with ETC. So when it comes to his introduction, he's not listed as a panelist, but he's an attendee with his phone number starting with area code 816 for his introduction.
Perfect. Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, Ryan, full disclosure, is an hour later and was on dad duty, so he's willing to help us out here tonight. Ryan, do you want to go?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
All right, good deal. Thanks for having us. Yeah, thanks for all of the concessions here for my situation this evening. I apologize. But yeah, I'm Ryan Murray. I'm the Assistant Director of Community Research with ETC Institute, who conducted the statistically valid survey. We do that all around the country.
Perfect. Thanks, Ryan. And Jeff King.
Hi, folks. Jeff King with Ballard King Associates. We are a recreation facility and operation planning consulting firm, and we help with market analysis and also the operating pro forma for the project team.
Wonderful. Okay. There's others from all of our respective firms that have been a part of this process, but we really represent the core group working on this project. So just as a reminder, this has been a long time coming, right? We've been working on this process for a while. I've actually shown a similar slide in past presentations that this really started back in 2017 when there was a previous study done on the need for a recreation center. And then I think a key point here was when a recreation center was defined as a priority and it was adopted in the Billings Parks and Rec Master Plan. So then moving forward to today here, building on the master plan work that was done previously, we have now been completing a concept design to further move the master plan forward and further define the project. So this process has been going through majority this year. We started early spring, and it's been a process that was led from a core committee and an executive committee, really the ones kind of charged with doing the legwork on the project. That was intentionally a diverse cross-section of the community represented in that core team. And then as we look beyond the core team, it was really a community-driven process as well. So through that work, a project goal was established early on in the process. One of our first tasks that we led the core team through was, what are we trying to accomplish? And let's confirm it aligns with the previously established master plan. So the project goal was to create a multi-generational indoor recreation center that reflects the needs of Billings residents while also building our tourism economy through amateur sporting event recruitment. So we had representatives from within the community on this, and it became important right out of the gate in this work that we balance the needs of both the residents and what people in Billings want to have for amenities and what the needs are, but also then how do we use this facility to have an impact on the economy when you think about dual use of Billings residents' needs, but also sports tourism, and how do we really capitalize on both and with those needs. So as Ryan mentioned, he led the effort with our community survey. So this was, there was a community survey that was done in 2019 when we did the master plan. And that was the first reach out into the community to say, what are the needs? Let's confirm. And at that time, we also met with all of the recreational groups in Billings, just representatives really trying to glean what are the needs of the community. So then in 2022, we did another statistically valid community survey with the goal of, one of the reasons to do that was to see, did anything change between 2019 and 2022, which was impacted by COVID. So across the country, some of our outside experts had found that there were in fact changes in some communities regarding recreational needs or what priorities people were searching for. So we did it in 2019. We did it again in 2022. We largely found that fairly similar results. There were certain amenities that went up and down slightly, but largely the top unmet needs and kind of highest importance factor program amenities stayed the same. And it's important to note, and Ryan can speak more on how statistics work because he's far better at that I am, but the importance of the way the survey was administered is that it is statistically valid in that a lot of work goes into how the survey is, there's a random sampling and ensuring that the recipients of the survey create an even distribution among age, gender, family size, and household income so that we can be sure to get that cross-section. And another way to think about it is if 555 surveys are how many we received back. If you were to collect 555 surveys from randomly selected residents 100 times, 95 of those 100 times we're going to get the same results within a margin of error of plus or minus 4%. So Ryan can speak to that a little bit more, but I think it was an important step in achieving our goal of ensuring, kind of one facet of ensuring that the facility becomes reflective of our Billings residents. So some of the survey is long, and I know many of you have read it. I just pulled one key piece out of that, which is you can summarize a lot of that response in the survey into this chart, which is the top priorities for investment for recreation facilities and amenities based on this priority investment rating. So if you look down the top, go down to the top 8 or so, you can see leisure activity pool as well as lap swimming, top priorities, gym and court sports, elevated indoor track, which does align with the #1 recreational activity in the country of just exercise walking. Exercise, open fitness area, group exercise studios, and indoor ice skating rink. So as I mentioned, it was really important to us and to the core team that this process was community driven. We had community meetings that continued to build on the community meetings that had been done over the last 5 years, really through the iterations of this project. We really wanted to capture that feedback. So getting the community who maybe didn't get a survey, giving them opportunities to come and provide that feedback was really an important aspect of what are we missing? What are we trying to achieve with this facility, and how do we dial in the needs of Billings residents? And each time we continued to refine and continued to further define exactly what program amenities were important. So now pivoting to design, if many of you have seen this before and recall, the site that was selected during the master plan is immediately adjacent to Amen Park. So here we have on the left side of the screen up here, which is the west side of the site, this is really the east end of Amen Park. So for orientation, we have King Avenue East down on the south and South Billings Boulevard running north-south. And the red outline is showing the site that was purchased by the city of Billings back in 2018, I believe. So the opportunity then, when you consider that site, is to think about a recreation complex that now doesn't just consider the indoor component, but also how we leverage the already existing outdoor recreation space at Amen Park. It's a tremendous opportunity when you consider how we take advantage of both of those. So thinking about, during the early site design, the green arrows represent kind of the primary axes of the design. So thinking about connectivity, both in a north-south and an east-west orientation, with a real driver of this building doesn't have a front door, because it's just as important that we're pulling people in from the park as it is from the parking lot on the south and on the east side. So the white boxes here represent the general outline of the building. The red is showing actually like fire loop and circulation around that side of the building. And then the blue is the zone for parking that can be accommodated on this site. So then looking at the actual, how that diagram translated into the site design, you can see how this building really tucks up against the north and the west boundary, up against Amen Park. So we can really take advantage of that circulation. And then parking really spills further out as we go toward the east. There's a main drop-off. Number one right here is the main drop-off loop. And then circulation in and out can happen both on the south and on the east sides. So jumping to the building now, as we come further in with more detail, the total building is about 177,000 square feet. And this is an overall floor plan of the main level. So primary entry is right here. And in the north, south, and east, west green arrows that I showed you on the site, those run north, south here, and east, west here. So the building is really divided by three large volumes: the courts in red, the ice in dark blue, and the aquatics in light blue. And we'll look quickly at each of these spaces and the program within them. And then when you jump to the upper level, I apologize, that's a little bit light on the screen. The upper level has administrative space, open fitness, group fitness area, and then this important walk jog track that goes around the two-story gym volume. So looking now at the, so what we'll do here in a few slides is click through each of the amenities. If the contrast was better, you would see that the amenity we're talking about pops out in color. So I'll just describe it here. The lobby and kind of connector spaces are really everything happening through here as well as through here. So again, bringing that scale down, thinking about how people move, where they're going to be comfortable. This is just as much about visitors that aren't in an activity as it is those that are. So providing amenities and lounge spaces and comfortable hangout areas, if you have a child playing sports or you're with somebody playing sports, is an important aspect of what we're doing. Also thinking about this central location for the check-in desk, centrally located so that we can keep, you can minimize staffing. That desk location can see down the entire facility, ultimately impacting our cost for operating the facility. So then looking in dark blue there, we have locker rooms supporting the aquatics. The light yellow is administrative spaces. And then moving to the upper level, we have some additional administrative office space for support. The multi-purpose spaces throughout the building are located here with child watch and a party room, here with multi-purpose room, and then also looking at this north-south area for a clip and climb space, really a popular amenity within a rec center like this for younger kids. It's another amenity to provide activities for the younger kids. Their older sibling might be playing in a basketball tournament, and there's a clip and climb, kind of it's a cross between a rock climbing wall and a jungle gym of sorts. And then also thinking about one of the important factors identified in the community survey was multi-purpose space happening down here. And then, of course, courts, a big need identified in the community. We've established a kind of a real sweet spot in the court size to 4 large competition courts with 8 cross courts, a smaller youth court, as well as accommodating 8 volleyball courts. And then when we look at aquatics, we have a leisure pool that's happening here. This is the photos over here on the side give you a representation of what that might feel like. It's youth learn to swim, kind of fun amenities within the aquatics area. And then we have the 50-meter pool that's happening, the competition pool that's happening on the left side over here. The last time we were in front of you all, there was really great feedback around the goals, and you heard from many community members about the importance of courts, ice, and aquatics. And the feedback that was heard loud and clear is, if we're going to do this as a community, we need to do this right. We need to make the investment. We had some smaller versions that we talked to you about, and the feedback came that it's time to do this right for both the community as well as considering the sports tourism opportunities with a facility like this. So your feedback last time really helped drive a lot of these key decisions. And then, of course, the third large volume within the facility is the ice rink. And that has spectator seating as well as the necessary locker and support spaces. And then on the upper level, we have open fitness, workout spaces, and then that jog track, which when you're on that track, you're looking down into the court spaces below. Then if we switch to the outside of the building, this is really intended to give an overall scale, help begin to understand the potential of a facility like this. It's not fully designed or cooked yet, but it's intended to really help understand the magnitude of a project like this. How big are we talking? What's the overall feel? The core committee was involved in this process of saying it really needs to be of its place. It needs to be sensitive to understanding where we're at, both in the state and in the region. And then also thinking about, when you get to large volumes like this, it's really important that we consider, how are we going to bring the scale down? How are we going to make this comfortable? Drop-off points, arrival. Now, here's an example of how we're doing that. When you're approaching this building from the east, from the parking lot, you're walking under this covered canopy here, and the larger ice volume is happening just behind. And then looking from the Amen Park side, also, again, making sure that it does not feel like a back door, thinking about how people are going to arrive from Amen Park and the importance of that. We've also located the concession stand on that far north side so we can get dual use for Amen Park as well as the indoor rec. And then if we zoom back further onto the soccer fields and look at how the facility sits up against those fields, you can get a sense of that overall scale. And then a couple of aerial shots just showing, again, here's the soccer fields both to the west and wrapping around to the north. You can see here how site circulation is starting to work, and parking lot off to the east. And then again, now looking from the north, looking south, soccer fields here for orientation, entry point on the north side, as well as an entry point on the west side. So overall project cost, jumping right to the bottom line, is about $98.7 million. When you factor, that's what we call total project costs. So an important distinction is that that factors kind of it's all in number. Oftentimes just construction cost gets talked about. It's really important to understand there's construction costs, there's market volatility and additional contingency built into this, as well as all of the soft costs associated with a project like this. And then when we look at operational costs, distilled into, there's a lengthy component of the full concept design document explaining, with all the spreadsheets explaining the assumptions in the cost model, but the effective, all of that is that it's hitting about a 74% cost recovery. And that's assuming that's basically looking at expenses, and it's looking at revenue. And then you take the delta from that. But there's a lot of variables to that. And Jeff King is masterful at this, and this is what they do at Ballard King, is build operational models for rec centers. That is literally what their expertise is. So he can answer more questions around that. But it's also important to note that there are these are conservative assumptions that the model states can ideally be beat, especially when we consider some other factors. There are different ways to manage the facility, and he was working with the Parks and Rec Department to determine what efficiencies, for example, could be found if they manage the facility. Can you get dual use out of staffing? And there's a different ways to manage it that comes with a whole other conversation. But generally, just want to hit that note that we're about 74% cost recovery, which Jeff would tell you is pretty good for a facility like this working around the country. Okay, it was quick.
Thank you, Dusty. Who do you, it'd be nice to hear from the rest of the team, at least briefly. So I'll let you orchestrate the order of that.
You bet. So I'd first just like Jeff to speak a little bit further since we finished on cost recovery. Jeff, if you would just speak as to some of the modeling work that was done and maybe your experience with similar facilities with these kind of cost recovery numbers.
Thanks, Dusty. There are several points I would like to make. One is that clearly we were and pride ourselves on being very transparent in this process. Staff can tell you, and Dusty and the design team can tell you that we weren't hiding any of the costs. Everything was out in the open, and we wanted to make sure everybody understood the calculations that went into this operating pro forma. That being said, the overall cost recovery rate of 74% is good, especially for a community the size of Billings. But we find that typically centers that are in more rural areas have a cost recovery rate of somewhere between 40 and 60%. In urban areas, that becomes more 60 to 80%. And I will point out there are some urban areas where these facilities do pay for themselves. But typically, those are in larger markets and have high demand and high elasticity in terms of fees and those types of things. So, being at 74%, you're in a pretty good position. Typically, you would expect that you are going to grow revenues in the neighborhood of, 4 to 5% for the first 3 years as you get greater market penetration. Expenses, of course, are going to go up, about 3% every year, maybe more, given the the economy that we have today. But over a 5-year period, you should see that cost recovery rate going up, and especially as you reach full penetration in terms of membership and rentals and activities that are scheduled in the facility.
That's great. Thanks, Jeff. Let's see, we'll move on, and then if you want to circle back to
so
questions.
Council, we'll get these presentations, and then we'll just open it up for questions. We'll probably start on one end and just work our way down. You can put your questions to anybody, but let's finish the lease presentation. So, Dusty.
Perfect. Okay. Kevin, any feedback, any additional comments you want to offer regarding the design?
Yeah, certainly. So regarding the design of the facility, we've designed it with concepts in mind for maximizing efficiencies within the space, as Dusty had mentioned, and trying to centralize the control location so that really areas that need to be monitored from a drop-off check-in perspective are handled behind that location, and then in front of it, things are program-driven, like the ICE facility. The other thing to note would be earlier iterations of this project included the potential for 2 ice rinks at this location. And so if that is a desire to move forward in that direction, conversations will need to be had with the park area and verifying that the facility can cross that blue line that Dusty showed on the site plan. But we had iterations that were showing that, so that is potentially viable at the site. And we checked it in terms of quantity of parking, scale of the building, adding additional spaces to help support that. The other key part too are all the support areas throughout the facility are really organized and designed and scaled to work in concert with the other operations and programming. So meet management rooms for when the competition pool is in use from a competition perspective, but then those can also be used for lifeguard training rooms or an additional party room when it's not in competition mode. So we really thought about a lot of the flexibility of the facility to provide the most adaptability for the community.
Perfect. Thanks, Kevin. And Ryan, do you have anything further on the survey?
Can you hear me?
Yep, we got you now.
Can you hear me now? All right, sorry about that. I had to go through all that meeting. No, I don't have anything else to add unless somebody's got questions.
Okay, wonderful. All right, that concludes the presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Dusty. Thank you, Kevin, and Ryan, Jeff, all appreciate it. Council, I just will turn it over to you. I'm sure everybody's going to have some questions. Why don't we start down with Ward 1, if that's okay, and we'll just move this direction. And if you don't have something, we'll come back to you later. So, Councilmember Shaw, if you want to kick us off.
Sure, I'll kick us off. First, awesome work. I mean, this is really exciting for Billings. I love the 50-foot pool. I love the leisure pool. I love the clip and climb wall. All of it's great. Do you guys have a recommendation for us on management and how that could work and what models you've seen from other rec centers across the country? Because I think that's an interesting question that hasn't really been touched on.
Yeah, it really is. And it does go, there's a whole another discussion there that goes a little bit beyond what was defined here. But I'm gonna ask Jeff to weigh in on that because he's got so much experience. Jeff used to run facilities like this, and now he's built a business helping others build the model to run them. So Jeff, maybe if you could hear that question, could you provide a little feedback there?
Sure, thanks, Dusty. As you can tell by my hair color, I have been in facility management a long time. And that comes with the territory. The overall management, typically we find that these facilities, because of the size and oftentimes how they're funded, are typically operated by a municipality. We are seeing more models on across the landscape, partnerships between YMCAs and municipalities where the YMCAs don't necessarily have the capital to build. That's where the municipality comes into play, but they do have some expertise in operations. And so there are a number of models like that across the country. There are many operations that will, in a sense, contract out some of the operations. One you typically see is group fitness classes. It's not uncommon, not uncommon to hire a company to teach those classes for you. In some cases, you can find companies that will provide swim lesson instruction. So there are portions of it that can be leased out. And we also see some of these facilities that are being operated by the private sector. Generally, you're not going to find the private sector operating swimming pools unless they're outdoor pools. And you like in Kevin, in my backyard, we have Highland Hills has Water World. Certainly those large aquatic parks are sustainable, but you do not see a lot of private sector management and operation in the swimming pools because of the challenges of the high cost for operation. You do see a number of ice rinks that are operated privately. That's not uncommon, and in essence, you kind of have that in Billings now. And we also see one of the emerging markets that we see is a movement towards field houses, and that could be either multiple hard courts for volleyball and basketball, or in some cases these field houses are turf facilities that appeal to soccer, football, baseball, and become year-round training. those we frequently see the private sector developing those properties. Again, because of the relatively low overhead cost to operate, those become much more attractive for the private sector to get into and make a profit.
Just have one follow-up, if that's all right.
please.
Okay. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you've seen models, for instance, where the city of Billings builds this, amazing recreational facility, but potentially one organization kind of manages ice, maybe one does aquatics, maybe somebody else does courts. Am I getting that right, that you've seen some models like that around the country that have worked, or is it all under one kind of umbrella?
No, that's not exactly what I was getting to. I'm sorry I missed the mark with that. For the operation of the center in totality, sometimes you will see a hiring of private contractors to run lessons, more programming driven than actually managing the facilities. An exception might be food service. You might hire a concessionaire that'll come in and run your concession operations. But typically you do not see a lot of these large buildings where part of the building is leased out or managed by a private entity or a different entity than the municipality.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank
We'll keep moving down. Councilmember Gulick, and you can address questions generically or to individuals, whatever your pleasure.
Okay, great, thank you. Dusty and your team, as you're putting together the cost estimate, looking for ways to have the upfront capital costs minimize operations, so looking for obviously highly efficient building design and opportunities for on-site generation of power. Can you speak to the estimate, what features that kind of assumes? I realize this is an early stage, so.
Yeah, it's at a very early stage. So we are working loosely right now with data from similar facilities and then applying them locally with our cost estimator to the Billings market. But we have IMEG on our team working on just different considerations for how are we using energy and what systems we could start to look at. But frankly, it just hasn't. We've started that conversation and we've started to talk about that with regard to cost, but it's one layer deeper than we've gone to date.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, just looking at the line item, the expenses for the utilities is, a sizable piece.
Absolutely, and that's conversations we've started to have with good examples around the country of what we can do there, and that'll be the next layer of exploration. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Councilmember Neese.
Thank you. Apologize, I was late, so I missed most of your presentation. Chris, is this presentation available that I can have so I can at least review it and see, maybe come up some questions later?
Yeah.
It is it? Okay, great. The only question I have, I guess, is on the cost and the operation. Does this take into account, it was, a little over $900,000 for the operational, that assuming we hit 75%, what the impact some economic changes may have on this? For instance, everyone talks about going into a recession. How does the entertainment or the recreation industry do within that, and what will happen to that, 900,000 number? Have you done any modeling on that?
Jeff, can you speak to that?
Yes. As far as the, looking into the crystal ball, that always becomes a challenge because you never know how much or how little the factors in that impact our economy right now will continue and to what level. We did, in essence, prop up the numbers that are critical from our perspective, and that's in the utility area, because the reality is Dusty and Kevin and the team can do their level best to design a facility that's going to be as energy efficient as possible, but you still have, and excuse the terminology with this, but you still have some energy hogs as part of this operation. your systems in your aquatic center have to run 24/7. And although you have some duty cycling that you can utilize on the ice side, you again have a very large expense in maintaining that sheet of ice. It's a crazy world in ice in that you have to heat the ground underneath so the permafrost doesn't build up. Then you insulate that, and then you freeze the surface so you can skate, and then you have to heat the air above the skating rink to keep everybody warm. So it's a vicious cycle. So you do have some components that are very energy intensive in terms of operation. But I will say that other than the shutdowns that COVID created, even going back to kind of the last recession we had, participation in recreation stayed high. People were looking for things to do, and so although things might be falling apart around us, there still seems to be that strong commitment to participate, get out, get active, and in some cases that's a social structure. So other than the propping up some of the utility costs and trying to project ahead for some of the staffing costs, that's about all we did in terms of modeling. We have not gone into saying, let's take this model and let's look at it from a worst case scenario, kind of a medium scenario, or best case scenario.
Okay, I think that answers my question. Just real quick, and I don't know is Andy here? I don't see him, but do you know what if we had this today and we had a $902,000 a yearly deficit, what the average homeowner would have to pay? Chris, do you happen to know that?
I'm going to say conservatively, you're talking about $12 a year for the median.
$12. So that would
that's-
basically be their membership fee, $12 a year, but they would still have to pay to get into the rec center?
So here's what I'm basing that number on. I'm basing the number on generally a mill generates about $225,000, $250,000 per mill. Each mill costs the median homeowner about $3. I think I'm rounding up on both those. So if I took $1 million, not $902,000, and figured it was going to be about 4 mills for the cost recovery components. Obviously, that's not the cost of bond. That's not the cost. That's just the cost recovery component. I think let's just make a range. $10 to $15 a year is what I would speculate the median home would pay to underwrite the operational side of this.
Okay, so $1 a month or so. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Wine.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have two questions, I think. So the first is sort of on the building side. I'm not a hockey mom or a swimming mom, but I think that for the most part, the design seems to be centered around being able to be successful at competitions, which I think is something that council said was really important, except the pool. I'm a little concerned that we don't seem to have any warm-up, cool-down space. Is the vision that you do that in the leisure pool? Like, with what's here, could we really host swim competitions?
Yeah.
Because I think there's a lot of demand.
Absolutely. Great question. Kevin has done, I'm going to let you answer this question based on your expertise.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple of scenarios that can be done with the pool in this with this question. One would be most of your competitions are actually run 25 yards versus the 50 meter. And so when that's the case, we can set up this pool to actually have multiple races occurring simultaneously, basically running north to south in that pool, or you can run them east-west. There's a variety of options how to do this. But then you receive some additional lanes within the pool that can be used for the warm-up, warm-down within that area. And then the other scenario that we can look at is in the leisure pool area, trying to adjust some of that pool to have some smaller lap lanes within it that can just be used for exercise swimming. But if you're doing a really large-scale event, some of those warm-up, warm-down activities could potentially happen inside that pool area as well. But with a 50-meter pool, you get a lot of flexibility for competitions for how you can execute them within that provide that aspect to 90% of the competition use.
Okay, and then my,
Kevin, if I could chime in on that from an operator's perspective, of being somebody that's operated a 50-meter indoor pool, because of the width of the pool, I mean, the pool we had was 25 yards wide. It actually gave us 16 lanes of competitive swimming, and we could accommodate up to 1,500 competitive swimmers on a weekend. And that still gave us space for warm up, warm down. So, you know, based on your population, you will have adequate space to accommodate that.
okay. And then I wanted to just talk a little bit about the revenue model as well. I know this is a little bit of it's hard, but I think what you've done here is tried to be conservative, which is a great approach for planning and budgeting, and I appreciate that. But my primary concern is that it might belie a lack of commitment to really aggressively programming the facility. I mean, obviously, I don't want to see us go in with a cost model that's super aggressive and assumes, you know, unicorns and rainbows, but I really want to know that we're programming this as hard as we can. And so when I look at what we see here, I don't see, unless it's sort of dumped into that general revenue category, which is a little amorphous for me, I don't see a lot of indication that we're doing like invitationals. I don't see indications that we're doing after-school programs. I want us to be conservative in assuming revenues for safety's sake, but I want to know that separate and apart from that, operationally, we are really thinking hard about how to pack this facility. So my question is, do we have metrics on that? Do we have metrics that say our target is we are using 85% of this facility 90% of the year, something to that effect? Do we have something we're shooting at?
We do. Jeff, do you want to talk about the hours of operation and the assumptions there?
Yeah, I think, Dusty, if I recall correctly, we're talking 106 hours operations per week.
Right, I believe that's correct.
And so.
Six or six?
106.
Got it.
Yeah, and so that's quite a bit, that's quite a few hours of being operated, and that's correct in that we did not, we were conservative with the projections. I think if you were to go back and poll and query all of the clients we've had over the 30 years, what you would hear from them is, generally speaking, the Ballard King reports, the actual experience outperforms the pro forma. You folks obviously are elected, an elected board. So after year one, if the city comes back and says, well, our cost recovery rate was 80%, everybody's going to kind of cheer that on because it was better than what the quote unquote experts said it would produce. Likewise, if the situation is reversed and we say it's 75% and it comes in at 73%, now the tenor of the conversation is, well, what did we do wrong? What did we not execute properly to get it there? So there's a fine line there that we try to be sensitive and be conservative. Again, we're not trying to create a gloom and doom, nor are we trying to create pie in the sky. We're trying to be realistic on what your experiences can be. And as far as some of the metrics that you talked about, absolutely, there are all kinds of metrics that you can get into, including what percent of space is occupied over a course of a day. And the challenging part you have on that, however, is that there are parts of the building that, because people are in school, people are working, that inherently are less popular or less populated than other times of the day. But yes, there are all kinds of metrics that are available once you get into the operation that should be tracked, that should be good measurements as a council to be able to determine how well the facility is doing based on those benchmarks.
Okay.
So I have a lot more questions on the modeling, which I don't want to get into tonight. I'm wondering if Chris or someone, there might be a time for other council members like myself who have a lot of modeling questions to maybe just do an offline session with Jeff and just be able to ask our questions and not consume so much time during a meeting.
I'm confident that they would be willing to do that. We certainly would as a staff, so.
Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. We could just set up a separate time with a little panel and we can just roundtable as many of these as you want. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Joy?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Could you go back to your slide with a survey of activities, top activities that people were interested in the community? I have this thought that isn't formulating as a coherent question or even a comment. I remember we went to Denver and we were touring facilities, and I'd never been to a pool where they play underwater hockey. I think you remember that one?
Yeah.
And so what I wanted to ask was, how do the priorities that are reflected in this survey sort of look across the country? Because I'm thinking there are probably people in Billings who have never heard of underwater hockey that you could play at 10 o'clock in the morning when all the kids are at school and nobody else is wanting to use the pool. So I just wondered if the person who worked on the survey could kind of give us an idea of, because there's so many programming things I'd never heard of, and I don't consider myself very sports-minded, but I'm sure others had not either. So I was just wondering, how do they kind of reflect in communities of our size or across the country, kind of how they reflect? Thank you.
Ryan, did you hear that question?
Yeah, I heard some of it. Was it mainly about asking about how we kind of populate those lists?
Yeah, start there and then I'll add to it.
For the priority. Yeah. So I think that we start pretty vague most of the time in those lists as a way to kind of give overarching idea, kind of a plan for the community. So, and the one that I think is still up on the board here, the top one's indoor family leisure activity pool. Now, that describes the overarching, type of amenity, but it doesn't get too specific into what's included in that. And we try to take the same approach with the programming to get a general understanding and aggregate need or desire to use or participate in some of these items without kind of nailing down the organization on what you have to provide or what you should be providing. Kind of allowing those communities to kind of put their people to work, hire locals like Dusty here and all of his other staff, and kind of go to work on what that looks like in Billings versus kind of what that looks like more nationally or more broadly.
I think one of the comments on that, when we did tour some of these facilities in Denver, I think the beauty to the synergy that occurs in a multi-generational rec center is there's a wide variety of activities for a wide degree of skill sets and ages, right? So we saw seniors playing pickleball to infants in a newborn swim class, right? So we saw that spectrum. And as the facility grows, one of the things that we've talked about, once we have the baseline components, once we have a pool, once we have a sheet of ice, the additional programming and creative programming will grow. So curling, for example, is a growing sport on ice where once we have 2 sheets of ice in the community, once we have more programming around it, that will continue to grow. Other communities have seen that, where once you build that particular amenity and program it, you'll start to find an interest base. So this list is based maybe somewhat more globally around the idea. I mean, Ryan's example around a leisure activity pool, it doesn't define what leisure activity swimming is. It could be, as we saw in some of those photos, a range of, a lot of kid amenities within the pool with splashing and slides, or it could simply be a place for non-competitive swimming, but learn to swim and a little bit more leisurely swimming. So it really can run that spectrum, but the importance is understanding when comparing these different amenities, what would your priority be in terms of, yes, I can see myself swimming in here. I don't exactly know what it entails yet, but there will be more creative programming that comes with the facility.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dusty. If we do have an offline get together about the operation costs, and this is a comment, not really a question, but I was struck by the assumptions about what people are getting paid. And I thought those looked like old numbers. They had, $12 an hour, and every time I go through McDonald's, it's starting at, and it's a lot more than $12. So anyway, that would be one issue about whether those are accurate numbers in today's inflationary environment. My questions really go to kind of the public's role here. And let me start by just thanking the core committee. I read all of those minutes from each meeting. Thank you for your staff, Dusty, who put together those minutes. Very, very helpful in following the flow of thought that went into the design. I encourage the public and any council members who haven't read that to dig into those minutes. But my question, I guess, is really for Dusty and then or anybody else, and then for Jeff that's related, and that is where is the public? We're talking about spending $100 million and a potential subsidy of $900,000 that would be an incredible plus for our community, but with the exception of some hockey fans and swimming fans, there's nobody here, and that's disconcerting to me. So I'm very concerned about that. So where's the public? Who's the public? We hear a lot about these generic terms of the courts community, the swimming community, and the hockey community. Well, to me, I'm not seeing a community. I'm seeing a couple of people. This really would require a community effort to support this, to pass this, to pay for this. So knowing there is that public support is a really big deal. And I just want Dusty, if you can comment on that. And then related to that will be a question for Jeff, since he's been around a lot of these projects. Private philanthropy is always a part. In a community our size, Jeff, with a project like this, what's a realistic percentage of the project cost that we should be planning on to be coming from the public in the form of private philanthropy? So, but we'll get to that in a second. Dusty, you want to just comment more generally?
Yeah, so I think if for anybody that was at the community meeting, the energy and the level of attendance was superb. We had more people attend that community meeting than I for various different project types. I host and run a lot of these types of, for civic projects, community meetings are a big component. And oftentimes getting the public to come to a meeting like that to garner feedback and to really kind of engage in what do we want to accomplish as a community is hard to do. Right? It's hard to get people to come out in the evening to attend a meeting for something they're not really sure what they're there for or what the end goal is. But this was packed. It was shoulder to shoulder in the library room, and the general sentiment was, "What can I do? What can I do? We need this in Billings. What can I do to help?" And while people aren't here tonight, I don't think that's reflective of the level of excitement for a project like this. We have been a part of this for several years now and watched the momentum continue to build. And the community engagement from this cycle, even compared to the last in the master plan, is noticeably higher. And part of it is because the discussion is now happening in the community. And people are realizing this is something that we need. They're starting to see a continual feedback on, hey, that we had input. We're starting to see it in the design. If you read the comments in the survey that's in the full report, the open feedback section at the end, there was a noticeable amount of comments that said, I hadn't really thought about this, but what a great need. We're empty nesters now. Our kids were really involved in youth sports, but they're all in their 20s, and absolutely this is a need in Billings. So there's an awakening that has to occur for the community to say, now I see it, now I get it, this is something that will benefit the community. So when we talk about public engagement, it's critical. We've said from the very beginning that this facility has to be reflective of people that live here. It has to be supported by people that live here. And then we need to balance it economically with sports tourism and some of these other opportunities. But in order to do that, we have to continue to reach out. So this is really that phase of the project. When we talk, this scope of work was defined as the concept design phase. That's really identifying what we're building and how we would get something like this accomplished. And now when we talk about funding and we talk about continuing to move this ball forward, it really is going to hinge on community engagement. So an outreach campaign, and just like you would do to pass anything, that's where we begin to inform the public. I think it's not unlike you would maybe compare it to passing a school bond. The first part of the work has to be, what do we need and how are we going to accomplish that? And the second phase is then, now we got to engage the community. Now we need to really start that outreach process.
Okay, thank you, Dusty. Jeff, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I don't know if you're prepared to comment, but part of incentivizing people to vote for something like this is when they see that there are private donors already lined up, and therefore it doesn't have to all be public tax dollars. Can you comment for what we might want to look for in dollar terms or percentage terms in the private philanthropy world?
Well, I think your point is well taken in that the public, if they can see that you have some of those funding mechanisms in place, that does certainly make the, increases the appetite to take on a project like this. There are, and I don't know the percentages, that's the one that's catching me off, I have to do a little research on, but there are 4 communities that, and 2 of them we're working with now, but one is the, in Marshall, Minnesota, that's Red Baron Pizza is housed there, and so their facility, you know, it's called the Red Baron Arena, and obviously there was funding from Red Baron that went into it. I know another one that's called the Schwann Center. Again, a lot of corporate dollars went into it. Sanford Health is famous for some of what they do in the communities that they're located in. Even sometimes in small communities. I did a project in of all places, War Road, Minnesota, home of Marvin Windows. And they were looking at essentially taking on the cost of the entire operation just to try to make their community more attractive for people to live and generate more employees for Marvin Windows, that kind of thing. So there are examples of that. I'm sorry, I can't tell you what the percentage is. I'm sure it varies by facility, but to your point, yes, there are those opportunities.
Okay, thank you. I won't belabor it any further. Councilmember Tricky?
I had 3 points, and you literally hit all 3 of them.
Hey, great minds, something like that.
So, great work. I look forward to us moving into the next step. And I guess I would say that I would like to see us putting some serious thought into that last issue of how do we really start revving up the excitement for this.
Good, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Parrington.
I have a lot of questions as to how the survey relates back to what is actually being presented. And I don't know that I can, you know, ask the questions well, but I'll give it a shot for just a couple of things. It looks like, I'm just going to take the one that was the question 5 that was on page 7, why people don't use the park and recreation programs here. And the top 3, and the others were very minimal. The top 3 with the fees were too high, people are too busy, or they're not interested. So, so I guess I would relate, and how would you relate that to what this is that currently our parks and recreation are not providing enough different types of programs because they don't have a facility? How am I supposed to look at that response?
Yeah, that's a fair question. I might ask Michael Whitaker to weigh in on anything regarding to parks programming. The intention of the survey was to ask, there is a component of, if you don't have an indoor court space like this or pool, then that's going to impact people's response to, why do they not use the facility? Well, we don't have that facility, right? So then the survey goes on to ask those questions. If you had these, what are both the largest unmet needs? What would you put as the highest importance factor? So we're trying to glean from the community. You may not have this facility now, so using existing parks and rec programming or facilities is somewhat different than what we're looking to accomplish with a new facility. And if we had that new facility, what in turn would you want as amenities within that? So that's what we use to shape the programming in conjunction with, I think it's an important point that that survey provided those top program amenities. And then we balance that with the team's expertise on revenue generation, knowing one of the goals set out from the core team at the beginning was we really want to maximize revenue generation, right? So understanding that, as Jeff said, in a more rural area, 40% cost recovery might be fairly typical or might be on the low end, but not unreasonable. Our core team said we don't want that, right? We want a higher cost recovery. We want to exceed the kind of baseline in order to minimize that delta that we're seeing every year. So if you look at program needs within the survey as well as cost recovery and design efficiencies, that's really how we land on what's happening within the facility.
And Michael, it's all yours.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Just to touch on Parks and Rec programming needs. We're very close at capacity as it relates to programming indoor facilities. We work closely with School District 2, but for some reason they want to use their facilities too. But we're running out of space and time to run programs and activities. We are able to almost double the programs that we offer during the summer months because everyone likes a great outdoors to participate in programs in. But we're essentially running out of indoor space for activities. And it's not only square footage, it's the type of indoor spaces. I mean, as everyone knows, there's really not an indoor pool for aquatics. I mean, there's a couple pools that are struggling to keep running, but there's no really dedicated indoor facility for aquatics. So we're very close to capacity right now.
Okay, and thanks, Mike. So you touched on this, Dusty, about recovery costs. So I don't know, do you equate, and this may not be, this may go to Jeff, but do you equate the amount of space, the amount of energy needs, the amount of the population of Billings, and I'm just going to use that because you guys are here, for the ice? It has one of the highest needs as far as energy use. Space is, it has a lot of space compared to the others, but yet it's lower on the totem pole as far as the percentage of people that would be using it. So how do you equate the recovery cost for that segment of what the center would be used for versus, basketball courts or,
Sure.
the leisure pool or something like that?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
get that cost recovery.
Yep, good question. So each of those spaces has a different cost recovery potential based on fees. And I'll let Jeff just speak to that a little bit in terms of how there's a component of creating a well-rounded recreation center which addresses these needs in the community. And then within that, we understand that the pool has lower cost recovery than the ice, for example. So from the onset of this, there was a discussion around the core team, which is an important point to note, that if we said our goal was to create a 100% cost recovery or make a profitable facility, then we would create all courts, for example, or a tournament ice facility. There are certain programs that are going to generate much higher cost, much higher revenue relative to cost. But this is a community recreation center, and therefore it's addressing these larger needs within the community. So Jeff, if you could just speak to that question a little bit regarding, say, revenue potential on hockey.
Right, and I also want to say that the basis of our projections, we just didn't pull this stuff out of the sky. It was actually through meetings with representatives from youth hockey, the skating club. So we did our best to try to understand the ice market conditions or the pool conditions, whatever it might be. by talking and speaking to some of the end users. That being said, clearly, the ice is a high cost, but it's next to fitness, probably the component that's going to generate the most revenue. And I'm going to give you an anecdotal story of when I was in the park and recreation profession. I operated a facility in St. Peters, Missouri, and it was an enterprise fund, and we were a solvent enterprise fund. We had 2 sheets of ice, we had a 50-meter indoor pool with a 10-meter diving tower. We had permanent seats in our pool for 1,400 people. We had a double gymnasium, we had an elevated track, we had a rock climbing wall. We had a fitness area, we had group fitness rooms, and we had a food service. And we also had a leisure pool as part of our aquatic package. So our enterprise was solvent because we made money with ice, we made money in food service, we made money with general recreation, we made money in fitness, and that was all enough to offset what we lost in aquatics. And let me take that a step further, because with our 50-meter pool, we were serving 7 high schools, 7. And in Missouri, the boys and girls season is split. So what that meant from an operator's perspective is we were able to extend that period of time we were collecting revenues from water time. In addition to the 7 high schools, we had Lindenwood University that swam at our facility. We had an age group swim program of over 250 kids. We had 100 kids in our diving program. It was not uncommon for us to go over 250 people a session for learning to swim. I don't know, as you looked at that pool, how we could have programmed it any more. In the best year we had, we lost 189,000 in that. We hosted a lot of state, regional, and even international events in that facility. So part of, I think, what Dusty was getting at is there's a balance. So he's correct. If you were looking at strictly from a cost recovery rate, that facility would look a lot different than what's being presented to you tonight. What I think the entire team tried to do is find a balance in that.
Thanks, Jeff.
So just last comment is that, Jennifer, I would like to hear part of that comment. So I think, or that conversation. So maybe if that happens, to at least allow other council members to be a part of that. And I appreciate the work that you guys are doing. I think it's it's an amazing project. And, I'll just say up front, $100 million, that's a chunk of change. So anyway, that's, you did an amazing job. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the feedback.
Thank you, Councilor Boyette.
Thank you, Mayor. I had 2 questions. One for Chris, I guess, is if $900,000 every year we would lose, that's $12 or 4 mils, what's it going to cost the $65 million for the average Mrs. Jones in a $400,000 house? What's her payment every year going to be to cover the $65 million? I wish Andy was here to tell us.
That's okay, Andy's watching. And he's nervous about what I'm going to say.
He's getting nervous.
I wasn't too far off on my $12, $11.76 if you want to get it down to the penny. Or I'm going to feel pretty comfortable, $12 to $15 a year for the median. On this side, give us more spread. I think you're talking somewhere in the $75 to $100 a year for the debt.
Okay.
And
Plus the $12.
that also, plus the 12, also recognize we've got about a third of the cost, more than a quarter of the cost that would be coming from the South Billings Urban Renewal Tax District. So yeah, I think that range of 75 to 100, recognizing the stage that we're at and recognizing that with what's going on in our world, every few weeks the feds get together and adjust interest rates. So for decades we got to say interest rates are super low and not a question, but interest rates, that's not where we are. So $75 to $100 a year, let's put it in context. We're talking about, appropriately so, significantly less than we talked about for public safety over the last couple of years. So remember, those two not bond issues, they weren't bond issues. Those two public safety levies combined were about $160 a year. First one was 60, second one 100. $160 a year is what we invested in the criminal justice system. This is a conversation about a component of quality of life and amenities that I think you're in the $100 ballpark on.
Okay, thank you. And then, Dusty, I haven't talked to a contractor yet who says, I'll guarantee this price for a house anymore.
If you find one, let me know.
They can't, so how, I mean, it sounds far-fetched that you're going to say it's going to cost $98 million today when this thing won't get built for 2 more years. You might, I mean, who knows what the price are going to be? So are you going to guarantee that you'll pay the difference?
Let me put this on my notes.
So I mean, how do we, the council, going to go to the public and say, I want 100 million when it isn't, it could be, who knows what, 2 or 3 years from now?
Yeah, it's absolutely a good question. We of course face it on every project and always plan for escalation. Now we're in a time of market volatility that's extremely high. So what we can do today is plan for that market volatility, build in contingency, and that's really, we're operating under the best information that we have. So we're doing cost estimates, then we're applying escalation and contingency factors to those, and then we can arrive at a good total cost, total project cost that we can use as a baseline, and then it's a constant evolution as we go. And what we would typically find in a case, let's say if we're going out for a bond, and let's just say this bond was going out next week, and we said, okay, we have to determine a number, even though we're not going to start construction for a year and a half, let's say. We do that a lot. We do that a lot with public projects because there's always this early upfront need to identify a number, and then we're not building until over here. So we plan those contingencies within it. We make our best assumption both with cost estimators as well as contractors that are part of the process in most cases. And then we all agree that this is the target. This is what we have to now land the project for. So as frankly, we do a good job at it. We make an assumption, we build in a contingency, and then we have to design to that number. So as we go, we're constantly evolving systems and evolving how we're going to approach the level of finish and all the variables that happen within that. But we know that total bucket of money cannot change. So that's our fixed number, and we just simply make it work. We design to it. So in this early stage, this is the best information we can do. We've conservatively planned and we build contingencies in, but we really can't do anything more than that with the information we have today.
So Dusty, I apologize for kind of jumping in, but right on this topic, you had a $16 million soft cost on top of construction cost that included these sorts of contingencies, as I understand it. So assuming that's true, can you just tell us that the assumptions that you used on this issue of future cost, in particular, the length of time before construction would actually begin, you need the money, and the rate of increase on an annual basis?
I can, but I do not have those in front of me. So I can get that back to you with the numbers that we built into the cost model.
But those are built into that $16 million number?
That's correct. Now, again, it's important to remember where we're at in today. We're facing inflation over the last 3 to 6 months that, we've not seen in a long time. So if the minute that what we're doing right now is utilizing a number that is, this information is based on how quickly things change today, already outdated, right? So if we were doing this next week, we would revise that number and continue to we have to be kind of finger on the pulse of what's happening, but that's the information that we developed based on this plan with conservative contingencies. Following that, we would continue to evolve it as we got closer. It's just as likely, we've got many clients right now that are saying, I'm going to wait to build for 6 to 12 months because we believe that that particular client may say, I believe that things are going to come back down, right? We're going to see the market soften. We're going to see contractor availability go up, subcontractor availability go up, material prices come down, and that very well may be the case just as much as we could continue to see it rise.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, Councilmember Boyette?
you've heard the name SWAG, scientific wild gas. That's kind of, I was just thinking that's kind of where we're at right now. We really don't know what this is going to cost.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would be somewhere between those two ends of the spectrum, where I feel confident in the numbers that we've developed based on the information we have today.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Ripsis.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Dusty, this is beautiful. I'm trying to contain my excitement. So I'm going to ask skeptical questions. The 2017 Parks Department Comprehensive Plan said we need a multi-generational recreation facility. It also said that best service levels or recommended service levels for recreation facilities in a community of our size is about 1 square foot per person in the population. So we've got about 120,000 people here. We might be looking at 120,000 square feet. This is coming in at 180. Is it fair to say that that extra 50% might be because we're also combining it with the need to, or the desire to have competitive type facilities in it as well as our core community needs?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's the one driver to that square footage change. One of the primary drivers would be going to the 50-meter pool. That was a big increase from the last time that we were here. The competitive and kind of competition related activities versus, say, leisure or community, really we're getting dual use out of the spaces. That was really important, right? We are truly multi-purpose spaces. So the courts, for example, with 8 youth courts, we can host a major tournament, and yet those same courts are striped for pickleball, for mid-morning pickleball, for those that aren't in elementary school anymore, right? So we have dual use out of many of these spaces. The same thing is true with ice, where we can go from curling to learn to skate, figure skating. A couple of loud voices that came to the community meeting were figure skating representatives saying, this is incredible. We need this facility in Billings. And their perspective was, it's not just hockey. It's not just curling. We have these other contingents that are using these facilities throughout the entire day. So that's where I think if you look through the programming model that Jeff has built, it's really important to note the assumptions around different uses, different times a day. And the core team felt it was really important that because we had a lot of discussion around maybe this facility should be much smaller, maybe it should be much larger. And we were really trying to right size around being able to do both sports tourism and doing community just needs and community driven events, because it really requires, the economic impact to our community is tremendous when you think about hosting the kind of tournaments that this facility can. It's really unlike anything in the region, and that's a really big deal, right? When you talk about getting support for something like this for a wide range of business owners in this community, and then you look at providing access for someone that cannot otherwise afford to go to a swimming pool or utilize a courts facility that's private, that's just as big of a deal. And so finding that balance so that we can address both of those needs really became, I think, the core of the work that these committees did.
Go ahead.
So just to stay on this a little bit, one of the things I feel is like this is something that we've neglected for 40, 50 years, right? We shouldn't be building essentially a $100 million rec center. We should be building our third rec center, right? We should already have 2 in other parts of the town, then maybe we're adding the missing components at this point, but we've neglected those for years. So talk to me about the wisdom of putting all our eggs in one basket in this one part of town and not diversifying into possibly smaller facilities spread across town where they might be more community, regionally located and relevant to people in their homes where they live.
That is a great question. We also had that conversation, and I think it really boils down to probably most notably efficiency, right? Operational efficiency. When we have to staff multiple facilities, it's going to kill the operational costs. Also, the importance of the synergy created in a facility when we can host, say, a youth tournament all in one spot. Most commonly, you would find that spread among 12 facilities. Being able to do that in one spot has a far greater impact and therefore more likely to book the next one and the next one and the next one. So, you could simply boil it down to cost of construction, the efficiency of building in one getting this large economy of scale, and building this much square footage in one. Then to the earlier comment around operational efficiency, being able to capitalize on larger scale systems and energy share, and then operational efficiency.
Are we got time for comments after questions?
Be up to you, so sure. Okay. All right, we've gone around, council, we're not gonna go home at 7:30. I can see that, which is fine. This is a very important topic. So we'll open it up, and we'll just have some comments, but we'll try to wrap it up soon. And if you got some final up questions, it's up to you guys. So open house, Councilmember Denise.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have another question, Dusty, and maybe the group, or, we've been listening to this in the city. It comes from, of course, the city TIF. But, and we talked, and Chris, I talked to you about how much it costs the city, but this is really a community center. So how much conversation, how much presentation has gone into the county commissioners to really make this a city-county project so that the city isn't funding it fully, or if we do fund it fully, then what thought has been there to ensure that the county residents who use it are paying a much higher proportion of it when they come in, similar to what they do with the city dump?
Yeah, I think that will be a very important question moving forward. That really hasn't been discussed at length to date. The two surveys, in kind of seeking different data, the two surveys that went out in 2019, it included Yellowstone County residents. In 2022, it included city, we confined it to the city limits, just to kind of see the difference there. But beyond that, that's been brought up at our core team meetings, and really it was said that that's really important when we start talking about funding. But knowing that we really had representation in terms of this scope of defining a concept design that was reflective of all of Yellowstone County residents was really important, and that's really the extent of that conversation today.
So just to clarify, Mayor, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
That you're saying, so during other than public comment, if the commissioners wanted to come in public comment, they weren't invited to any meetings? They weren't solicited to say, hey, this is what we're doing, and take a look at it keep an eye on it, in the grand scheme of things, they're actually doing a lot of things at the Metro. They've talked about sports plexes at the Metro, things like that. So that hasn't been brought online with them, because to me, I think it would be important if you're just coming to ask funding, then they say, well, why would I fund something I had no input in? And yeah, maybe a great project, but then they may want to kind of back off of it unless they've been a part of the project from the beginning. So you've not included the county.
We've not done presentations to them. Yeah, everything, of course, that we've done has been open and inviting to all Yellowstone County residents, but we haven't targeted them specifically.
Thank you.
Okay. Good point. Something we want to get on the calendar. Councilmember Owen, Councilmember Gulek.
So what I'm about to ask is going to be an even bigger swag than what we've already got in here, but where are we on modeling economic impact to the community? Because, if we're going to ask citizens to potentially bear $100 or more on their, on their tax bills for a significant period of time, I would hope that we could show increase in jobs and an increase in economic activity. People ought to be able to at least earn the difference of the cost it's going to bear them. So where are we on that?
Yeah, that has not been identified. That would be a great next step.
But is that not in your scope of
no,
work right
it's
now?
not.
Is what you're telling me? I see. Okay, thank you.
This is a time for general council comments or questions before we wrap up. So, Councilor Ripsis, you wanted to give us a piece of your mind. Or something.
Well, I wouldn't exactly say it like that, but it really to tag on to the point that you were making, Mayor, I think, Dusty referenced the other comments that were in that survey. And I saw those as well. In fact, I counted them up, and there were 114 of them. And there were 39 of them that said, hey, this is great, I'd like to see this. And I only counted those that were actually specifically saying, I'd like to support this. There were 36 that said, don't raise my taxes, this is a waste of time. And then there were 39 others that had to do with something unrelated. So I think that is something that we've got to be very cognizant of, is this is not going to be a slam dunk. I think we have to understand what the impact to people will be on their taxes, which is the easy part of it. what it means in terms of, economic development, and until I see a model that actually shows me otherwise, I'm very skeptical of that particular piece of it. And what it means in terms of building our community. I personally think we have a good chunk of this that is inflated has the wrong kind of sense to it, but we're grossing this up to support activities that have a very specific user group interest at heart, right? And so that should be definable, and we should look to those user groups for significant contributions in those areas. If we're doing this to, host hockey tournaments and host swimming tournaments and what have you, then those groups need to come to the table. And before we come back and pass it, we need to be doing that work of here's where the private groups are going to come into play. We need to put that model together. And Jim, we've talked about this over the past 6 months is how do we put together a model that actually gets those private contributions in so we can go to the public and say, yes, it's a big ask, but here's how we're doing it. And the public that we're in with private contributions as well. So I celebrate what you've done here. I think it's beautiful. And like I said, I'm trying not to get too excited because there's a lot of work to be done yet. And that's the big piece before it comes back to us later this spring or later in the spring of 2023 and say when we want to pull the trigger on something like this, we've got to see that economic model in place and we've got to see that operational model in place that maximizes our ability to recover as much as we can out of this facility and use it to its fullest extent. So thank you. That was my comment.
Thank you very much. I'm going to just add to that in the hands of Councilmember Tricky. I would just add to that list of user groups or interested players here, School District 2. The TBID, the Tourism Business Improvement District, the hotel owners. We don't have a restaurant equivalent. The restaurants stand to make a ton of money from this. Fundamental problem we have is we don't have any local option sales tax to put money back into projects like this, even though these businesses will benefit tremendously. So we need to find out how that's going to happen on a more voluntary basis. So, Councilmember Tricky?
Your Honor, you'd called on Councilmember Gulick earlier.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you for, that was so long ago. I forgot about it. Councilmember Gulick, Councilmember Tricky.
Well, thank you. Given its location, it is really great for regional sporting events, close to the interstate and everything. But I think, as I've talked about in the past, to make it a really great community asset, we're going to need to look at ways to really connect it better to the rest of our community. And that's not so much about this. This is a great design. I love the sort of axes, the two axes there. But we also need to be thinking about if we're going to do this, how we're going to really connect it to our community, so that it's not just a certain subset that can use the facility, but. So, that's something for us to really focus on too.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Tricky, Councilmember Joy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council, everyone. I just want to say that when we're starting to talk about economic impact, community impact, and stuff like that, we need to remember that when you keep teenagers busy with things that society approves of, they're much less likely to slide into doing things that we disapprove of. So I would directly say, I don't know what the percentage is, but one of the reasons why our crime rate is as high as it is because we don't have facilities like this. And I think it's really important to keep that in mind as we move forward. This is more than just an economic equation. It is about our community. It is about the future of our community, and it's about our kids.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Joy. And just a reminder, we will have an opportunity for public comment in just a minute. And Councilmember Rowan.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, and thank you very much for the presentation. I've been on board with this for a long time, and I appreciate all the opportunities, every opportunity I've had to learn and to listen to what people have to say about this. And I did attend the public meeting, and it was tremendous. One particular man came up to me and said, someone said, you know something about this, tell me about it. And he had many questions, and I passed them on to somebody who knew more than I did. There was real excitement in here. And I'd like to tell you something that I don't know how many of you happen to bicycle around Amon Park. I do. And I can tell you, there are license plates from all over the United States in that parking lot every weekend, every day of the week, license plates from all over the United States. In fact, there's a group of a informal soccer team that plays their entire game without speaking English. They're from all over the world. There are people from different parts of the world who love soccer, and they're on those fields every day. So I don't know exactly what it would take for us to have an economic model that shows the input into the economics of South Billings, but I can tell you it's tremendous, because you can't get into McDonald's on the morning of a big soccer tournament at Amon Park. You cannot find a parking space. You can barely get down King Avenue from all the people walking and all the people trying to get there to do their activities. So I don't think that people who feel that South Billings is not well connected, and that isn't a criticism, but I can tell you it's more connected than you think it is. You can go on Facebook and you can set up your own little soccer tournament and play it at Amon Park, and no one knows the difference, and you don't need to speak English. So there's a lot going on in Billings. There's a lot changing in Billings. The people in Billings are changing. Their expectations for Billings are changing, and we need to be there, and we need to be leaders and be in front of that. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Rowan?
Thank you. I just kind of wanted to highlight some of the comments that Councilmember Tariki and others have said, that I think that crime prevention aspect as a part of the mission of this facility is really essential. And I know, I will continue to be a stickler on making sure we squeeze every bit of revenue that we can out of this, but there are some things that we need to do, I think, for the community that are cost savings, that are crime prevention savings. And so as we're looking at programming, I hope we are looking at those things that aren't just sports oriented, because I think there's tremendous pent up demand for sports in the community, but things like using those rec spaces for Lego clubs or, game nights or those sorts of things that give young people who may not be athletically inclined a place to go and recreate rather than the parking lot of some place where they get in trouble is really important. And so I think balancing the revenue generation, and I would hope that maybe well-meaning businesses would sponsor some of those non-revenue generating activities. It's just as important for our crime prevention activities. So I would like to see, as we continue to refine this proposal, for that crime component, that prevention component to really come in more strongly, and to show the public different ways that we can program out the sports side and the non-sporting sides. That I think would be important.
Thank you very much. Council, I'm going to open us up for public comment, because we do want to be able to hear from members of the public and still have an opportunity to process that before we wrap up and take time for a break. And we'll come back. Just a reminder, oh, by the way, this is not the only part of the Parks Department that is in need of capital investment. And we're going to sort of hear, as Paul Harvey would say, the rest of the story when we come back for item number 2. But let's open it for public comment. Just ask that you give us your name, address, and keep your comments to 3 minutes. Colonel Githens.
Hello, my name is Dawn Githens. I live at 3126 Harrier Lane. And I wanted to address some of the comments that you guys have already made. First off, this facility is so beyond needed, but I don't think I need to preach more to that choir. But I also need to make sure that it's clear that there are several of us that live in the city, but there are also others that live out of the city. This is a county and a regional and a Montana level facility. I added up once 2 years ago how much I spent traveling between gymnastics and swimming, because we didn't have the facilities to do either of those activities here, and they're activities that my children do. I could fund a small family with the amount of money that I spent going to the $250 a night hotels in Bozeman and the $300 a night hotels in Missoula, and the less expensive but very dangerous to drive up to Great Falls swim meets, because that is literally the only pool that we can do stuff in. So this is not just a City of Billings thing, and I commend you for bringing up the fact that this was a county-wide thing, but it's something that we need to draw county support for as well as legislature support for. Because we, the city, citizens, hopefully don't have to fund the entire thing. If this is going to be a county and a city thing, or a county and a state thing, which I fully believe this meets the needs for not just Montana, but the larger region, we should be allowed to do things like a bed tax or something like that. Hopefully when you guys look at those costs, I know that requires us to go back up to the state legislature. I get that, but I think we need to put the legwork in to do it, because not just the city of Billings people shouldn't be putting the burden of everything just on our shoulders, because I know that there is going to be a wide variety of people that are going to be using this facility. There was a discussion about the sports tourism and the competition and all of that piece. I will gladly drive the 20 minutes from my home to get to Amon Park. I live on the far west side, because it's not Great Falls, and it's not Bozeman, and it's not Missoula, and it's not North Dakota or South Dakota or Wyoming, which is where we currently have to go to do these things. This is something that I don't care where you put it in this city. It will absolutely be a welcomed drive for probably the vast majority of anybody that has kids that need to use these type facilities. But it's not just kids. My mom is we're going to say she's over 70, 75, who needs to do water aerobics and those kind of things. She can do those at home in Oregon. She can't do those when she comes here. So we just need to realize this isn't just a kid activity. It's a bigger than that. Like you were saying, the whole community needs this. Thank you.
Thank you. Next. Yeah, that was Dawn Giffens.
My name is Heather Hassick, and I'm at 6607 O'Donnell Lane. And I want to address your statements earlier, Mr. Mayor, about wanting to know where the community support is for this project. And I would answer this twofold. I would say on one side, the people that would support this the most from your athletic communities right now are driving kids to practice in multiple locations. So when you talked about wanting to build multiple facilities in multiple parts of town, I'm telling you as a parent, that is a nightmare. To have it all in one-stop shopping is brilliant. And I've talked to many parents who said, wow, if my soccer kids and my swim kids and my basketball kids were all in one spot, that would be brilliant, because I could actually work out myself while they're doing their projects. Now, the community wants to support this. I personally, because I'm aware of this situation, have talked to everybody that I know, from my dentist to the checkout lady at Walmart to anybody else that I've run across, and I have not yet found a single person that said, I think this is a bad idea. This facility is beautiful, and it's exactly what we need in this community. I think it meets the needs, and it would be an asset for the community as a whole. I think what we are waiting for is the go-ahead to spread the word. You have an entire athletic community, pick a sport. They're looking for a facility like this. And if you give us the word that you need us to knock on doors or talk to the checker in the grocery store or whatever it takes, people are willing to do that. You just have to let us know, because most of these people that I talk to are completely unaware that this is even something that could happen in our community, but they all agree that it's needed. We just have to tell them it's coming and when it's coming. And I think people will support it. I live outside of the city limits. I want a chance to vote on this. So I would highly recommend that you try to get this into the county and not just the city, so that people like myself that intend to use this facility have an option to vote on it. Because we want to give you our support and we want to see this happen. And so the other thing I will say on this is I was speaking to a mother out of Williston, North Dakota last weekend. They have a beautiful facility in Williston. And she said that if you build it, they will come. You build this facility and it will pay for itself. She also said they have a daughter who's 14 years old and looking to be a national competitor. They can't get what they need in North Dakota. They are looking to move. And she said, we want to come here. We like your program. But she said, I'll be honest. She said, I'm concerned that you don't have a pool facility. And I said, well, let me tell you what's coming for our pool facility. And we had a 25-minute conversation about this facility. and she was highly interested. She said, keep me informed because we may potentially pick up our family and move to Billings, Montana because we can get what we need in this town and we can't get it somewhere else. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Sean Seedhouse, 104 North Broadway. Thank you for taking time to hear us. I sat on the core committee in this most recent planning step and will commend the work of all 25 people in that room who worked towards striking that balance, as Dusty mentioned, about trying to get the revenue generating things there along with community support and what has been voiced in previous surveys. So I'm really happy we are taking the next step forward. I actually did not plan to speak tonight, but I did want to address a couple of the things that were brought up in the kind of the comments section, especially as it relates to the ICE community, because that is a smaller group of people who are definitely represented in this new complex. And I will tell you, and it's been proven in lots of other towns in Montana, that the ice community will grow to the size of bowl that you give it. And with one sheet of ice that is 40 years old and on its last legs, this is basically a replacement facility that already runs a net profit each year without trying very hard. So the reason you see ICE as part of this big picture, even though it represents a smaller group of people, is in every single survey or every single modeling that was done with Dusty and his team in 2017 and was it 19? In all the options they gave you, the cost recovery was always the highest when you included 1 and 2 sheets of ice. And to Tom's comment about bringing something to the table, I think that the ice community brings the expertise to potentially run that part of the facility if you want us to, with a proven model we are already using, as well as we are a very tribal group and will support it financially. So I see us, while not being able to fundraise to the extent of being able to support the issue of $100 million to do it. Where we can really help on the back end is to, on the operations side, really trying to minimize that $900,000 a year deficit by subsidizing the other parts of the program that are more community minded. I think that answered your questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kevin Nelson, 4235 Bruce Avenue, member of the original steering committee, also the core committee. This is just a financial, as I see it, overview. The May 23rd meeting, there was a total project cost of $74.7 million. There's a $690,000 deficit with a 69% cost recovery. That was with third-party administration. Now we have well, let me go back. One of the last actions the core committee took was that we'd have a 50-meter pool, 2 sheets of ice. That was the last thing we did. Everyone, it was voted on and passed. And then the executive committee decided for some reason that the ice was too expensive or would cause the project cost to be too expensive and it may not fit on the property. I'm not sure if those are really legitimate reasons. But with that being said, the 50-meter pool stayed. In your May meeting, you didn't have a 50-meter pool. So now you have a 50-meter pool, but you have a $98 million project. So that pool just cost you $24 million, along with $174,000 of additional cost of expenses. And it dropped your cost recovery down to 74%. So I think you really got to have a conversation about what's that 50-meter pool really worth to you? Can you recover $25 million? So this making it a county thing, not going to happen. Laurel's working on their project. As soon as you show up at the county, Laurel's going to be right behind you, say, hey, fund ours too. A better alternative would be to expand a new district into the School District 2 levy district, which would go outside into the county but it wouldn't encompass all county people, because a large portion of that could be School District 2 funded, those parents in those property districts outside of the city.
I didn't do that to you. Looks like maybe we lost our internet connection.
You know, quickly on the ice, it's a huge benefit. Bozeman didn't build another pool, but they damn sure built another sheet of ice. You go to the city of Bozeman, to the Wrestler Center, they only have 2 public skate periods a week for a couple hours. The Frontier Center in Coeur d'Alene, here it is. Public skating is from 5:45 to 7 o'clock, $5 on a Tuesday. That's it. Because they programmed the entire structure, or their entire facility is programmed out for ice. As they said, ice was a component that core committee thought would be a real generator, a potential revenue producer, but also would increase your cost recovery percentage also. Laurel right now, you go to Laurel, they got posters all over town talking about their rec center. We don't have one in Billings. Not one poster. People are involved in Laurel. If anybody's from Laurel, Laurel's a strong sports community, always has been. Larson Storm Doors built the Larson Ice Center in Brookings, South Dakota, handed it to the city of Brookings. Brookings handed it back to a hockey community, and they run it ever since. 23,000 people supports 2 sheets of ice. Not that I'm here for the ice, but I am here because we never got to see, the core committee never got to look at this this project modeling with that 50-meter pool. We were never given these numbers. So the numbers I have, I don't know if they're correct or not. All I did was took the May 23rd numbers and tonight's numbers and just, they are what they are. Now, is this 24 million legitimate? I have no idea. But we never had an opportunity to look at that. We don't know where they came from. Or at least I don't know where they came from. I'll say that. I don't know where they came from. So I would just ask, I think there's a lot more to do here. I think funding is going to be an issue. But, you know, Mayor, the private can't get involved because they don't know. I mean, really, they really don't know what's going on here. They've never been given the opportunity to be part of this process. We don't need, he does a great job. We don't really need him right now, but we do need a couple meetings every couple weeks just to engage the community and get them involved in the process. And I think we could do that. Somebody could chair a meeting, a simple meeting every 2 weeks in an evening, and just have groups come in and talk to us. When we did this the first time at the TIF district, the pool people said, you find us the land, we'll build a facility. And the ice community said the same thing. You get us some ground, we've got money, we can help out with this funding. But they haven't had an opportunity to do that. So I'd call on you, Mayor, to put together a committee and let that committee just casually meet and discuss these items. A lot of this stuff that we heard tonight, we don't need the professionals there right now, but we could flush out a lot of these issues. There's a lot of smart people in Billings that would be more than willing to volunteer on this magnitude of a project and bring their expertise to this item. And I think we should tap into those resources, and I think we could get a long ways down the road on a volunteer basis until it came necessary to involve the professionals.
Thank you, Kevin. Much appreciated, and thank you for your service on the core committee and also Sean's. Any further comments? Mr. Tevlin.
Yes, hello everybody, Jim Tevlin, 2404 Quinn Haven Drive, and I'll be very, very brief here. If I was sitting in your spots, I'm listening to the whole thing here, and there's a lot of questions that you've got, and they're good questions. Let's get some information. The key thing in my mind, when I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, is we need a champion for this project. Who is going to be leading this? Because we're going to come to a point here. What is the next step? Who is going to be responsible for those next steps? Who is going to be the one, like what Kevin's talking about, that's going to be making the outreach and to get you the information that you need? That's the key thing that I just want to leave you folks with here. whose responsibility is this for carrying it forward? Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, we'll close, and nobody online, so we'll close public comment period. Council at 7:30. We need to wrap up, but I'd like to wrap up a little bit. I'm going to ask Dusty to comment, if you're prepared to, on Kevin Nelson's point. I made a similar observation when I was looking through the minutes. I'm looking at a $75,000 number, or $75 million number, and then boom, it's $100 million bucks. And so, and I knew that the 50 millimeter pool was added in that interim, but it was that earlier number, not inclusive of those soft costs. Is it an inflation factor? Anyway, I just wanted you, if you can comment on that sudden change.
Yep. Yeah, it wasn't a sudden change. It was an evolution over following the feedback we received after this council meeting of going to a 50-meter pool. That was a decision that the core team, in response to discussions here, said, yeah, we get it. It is going to be an amenity that's totally unique to this region, and therefore we need to do it. So we had early modeling with both with and without it. The presentation the last time I was here did not have the 50-meter pool in it. So the 50-meter pool, I'm going to dig a little bit here without looking at anything specific, but the 50-meter pool, in conjunction with continual evolution of our cost estimating, right? 6 months ago, the numbers were different. We're continuing to evolve those. But the 50-meter pool, Kevin, you may be able to answer this offhand or looking at anything in front of you, but just the cost of going up to the 50-meter pool, I don't know what that is as a separate line item, but it was primarily that. The majority of the other programming had stayed consistent, going to the 50-meter pool, and then continuing to evolve our cost per square foot and our estimating. This is not you have to be aware that this is an evolving process through the master plan. So the numbers are going to change each day as we make new programming decisions, as we're continuing to update all things regarding our cost.
Okay, sounds like that's a very expensive pool. I mean,
yeah, we talked about that. Remember last time we were here, we talked about the impact of going to a 50-meter pool. Jeff talked about it. We tried to be very clear that that is a big decision around going up to a 50-meter pool and the impacts of that, both on capital cost as well as operations.
Okay, I mean, just speaking personally, I'd like to have a better sense for how much that really is. How much was an inflation adjustment over just a few months, et cetera, et cetera. But Councilmember Boyette, Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. So I guess the model that we see now, is this etched in stone, or will it change? Can we add another sheet of ice? Can we reduce one of the pools, or is this a done deal? I guess that's the next question. It sounds like everybody's got a little questions.
Yeah. Were you going to?
No, you go, and then I was going to mention a next step.
Okay. So this is the concept design that has been recommended by the Parks and Rec Board to move forward. So I realize there's a lot of process related to next steps, and anything at this point, I suppose, could be reconsidered, right? But there's been a tremendous amount of work that's gone into getting to this point for Parks and Rec to vote on the next steps in terms of approving this concept plan to come before you all.
So, Chris?
So, Mayor and Council, a piece I would add is one of your next steps is to adopt this work. Because what if you don't adopt it? And we have this conversation another 90 days or 6 months or 18 months, and we talk again about whether there were going to be 2 sheets of ice or 25 meter or 50 meter. We do need to keep going through iterations, making decisions. Never too late to change those decisions, but if you don't make strides, then we just keep spinning our wheels as far as getting to what is going to go to our community to build. So that's not meant to draw a line in the sand, and yet it is meant to say the policy body, at the end of the day, decide, here's what you've got as the plan in front of you based on the recommendation of the Park and Rec Board, all the work of the core team. Are you going to adopt it, or are you going to adopt an amendment to it, or are you not going to adopt it? But I would say the worst thing to do is not be clear about what moves forward into further conversations with the community. Thank you.
Councilor Boyette.
So I'm an old bean counter. How do I know, well, let's say I want to add another sheet of ice and I want to reduce the swimming pool. Is there a formula that you have that you can say, this is what this costs, the 6 courts cost this, 1 sheet of ice costs this, 2 sheets cost this? I mean, if we're in for $100 million, what's $105 million?
Well,
See, what
yeah.
I'm trying to say is, are we a penny wise and pound foolish if we don't at least explore those? The other biggest thing I see is we don't have the input from the public to tell us what they want either. But the idea about the cost per section would be nice to have as well.
Sure. Yep. It's not quite that simple, but that is the model. Yes. So we push and pull on programming components, and then we go back and we do cost estimates to reflect that. So roughly we could say a sheet of ice costs this, or a pool going from 25 yard to a 50 meter costs this. It's important to note, though, that that work has all been done. So the core committee has gone through we went through iteration after iteration, trying to find, as you described, this balance of, if not this, why not go bigger? Why not go smaller, right? So we went through scenario after scenario to say, we started with saying, maybe we should target a facility that's 35 million, right? We talked about available funds through the South Billings TIF. Maybe that should be the starting point. So we had long conversations with the core committee around that as a baseline. And it was quickly decided that that was not going to meet any of the needs. That was not a good solution for achieving the goals that were set out. And then we went up to, why not? And so let's continue to add. And very quickly you can get to, say, a $150 million facility. And then scaling it back in check to what was seen to be the balance of meeting the needs of the community, meeting the needs of additional recreation opportunities, but also finding that balance of what the total project cost is and cost recovery. So if we go add other components, you rebuild the model for each of these capital costs and operational costs. So the only thing I would say on behalf of the core and executive committee is I think there's an element of trust that the work that they have done has been to address a lot of these things, to vet out those many, many scenarios that have been explored.
Councilmember Bernice and Councilmember Joy.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I share what Mike was talking about on this, but first I want to say I agree with Tom's comments earlier about some of his concerns and things like that. So Tom, I think there's one of the times, I really fully agreed with what you were saying there about how this can move forward, but yet we need to really nail down some of this information, make sure we're hitting the right target. But I'm a little confused. I'm sorry, I had some other questions, but I'm a little confused during some of the public testimony and what you were saying about the core team. We heard that, in the May time, we had learned this and then now it's changed, but the core team, we heard in public testimony that the core team was not involved, but you're saying the core team was involved through the whole change process. So do you know which it was?
Yeah, so and I can't remember exactly timing of what happened, what occurred when, but essentially the core team made the kind of final recommendation on the plan. There was continual question around the 50-meter pool and the 2 sheets of ice. So the decision around, but knowing that the project was getting up to a point where cost was a significant concern. So it was decided that the baseline facility had the single sheet of ice, the 50-meter pool, with then this additional sheet of ice as, hey, this would be really great, right? This allows us a lot of these additional opportunities. And then through that conversation, the opportunity for a second sheet of ice potentially happening at another facility nearby with the Sportsplex could be a great offsetting, it comes at a potentially a far lower cost, and it would achieve a second sheet of ice directly in the area. So this was moving quickly through the executive committee, and it was decided that that's one of those great opportunities that it's far less expensive, we can still accomplish 2 sheets of ice, and it's meeting the baseline requirements of the core team. So that was been some of the latest discussion.
That was the executive committee, but not the core committee?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Yep. And Mayor, one more question, if you don't mind. So there's...
Councilmember Joy.
Councilman Joy actually mentioned this, brought this up, is because I have been down there at Amen Park, and it's really busy. And so my concern is it is difficult to get around there when there's sports, and we don't even have a facility yet. So have you talked to the Public Works as far as, what street improvements are going to have to be made, widening, extra lanes, things like that, pedestrian crossings, over crossings, things like that to do that? And is that part of this project as well, as far as making sure that there's good access, to and from the park and easy access? Because once, maybe it's just me, but once I can't get into a place, I'll struggle the first time or two, but after that, I'm not coming back, or I'll find an alternative.
Yeah, I think that in addition to Councilmember Gulick's comments around bike, just basically alternative modes of transportation. How are you going to arrive at this facility, whether you're on foot, on a bike, or you're in a car? And from a site selection perspective, back in the master plan in 2019, we were exploring multiple sites, and we were doing a comprehensive site analysis and looking at all things from an infrastructure standpoint. And this site was far and above the best site. And understanding for a facility like this, for example, there are multiple points, 2 main roadways that we can get in and out of. Just some of the kind of fundamental issues of good site planning have occurred. Beyond that, the scope of this project in terms of, road implications or additional infrastructure for crossings, and that has not been yet explored. But certainly a key point, and it's part of this continual evolution of a project like this, right? We have to start here, and then it'll continue to grow so that we can solve a lot of these larger issues. But I would say, as far as sites go, this is really a good location because of its proximity to 2 major thoroughfares as well as
I don't disagree. I think the site is a good location, but my concern is we're looking at approving a project, and yet we haven't even looked at the additional cost it is going to actually make the site usable. And it would be nice I think it's something, not just nice, but it's something really important that we know what that cost is going to be, because someone has to bear that cost. And whether it's a TIF district adding to it, which is, they may be using up all their funds on this, in that case, it's going to have to be the taxpayers coming in to the table to widen those streets, make the street and light improvements and things like that. So I think we need to, again, that's some of the more information we need to know is if we're going to make this site usable, what additional costs are we going to have to put into the infrastructure? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Joy, and then Councilmember Purington, and we'll try to reach a conclusion here.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, and thank you, Mr. Easton, for mentioning. We did look at steering committee before, very, very long time ago, it seems like. We did look at various sites. There were a lot of different sites that were looked at. And this one was, and it was voted on and carried through from the steering committee as the best location. There were all kinds of proposals, and sometimes I guess it's the gray hair that I have, that I've been around long enough to remember a lot of iterations. And though I know that there are council members who may not trust that this has been very vetted, but I will tell you, very, very vetted over many times. Also, that the public has been invited previous to when the steering committee came out with its, didn't really have a recommendation on a single design. We had how many poster boards up with people putting their sticky notes on what things they thought. So although I don't want to take our time, but although I know that there are council members who feel like maybe the public hasn't been involved or we haven't been thinking about where this should go, it has been thought about. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Purington. And just remember, Council, although I appreciate Chris's desire to have some, at some point, endorsement, that's not on our agenda for tonight. So that's for a future topic. Councilmember Purington?
Thank you. And that is one of my concerns, is that we're going to see this next as, okay, are we going to adopt this? And I think there are a lot of unanswered questions that many people have. And Dusty, you opened that door, because I was going to ask about the sportsplex. It's on our agenda for next week to vote on that. And we haven't really brought that in. And so I am concerned that the executive committee did propose the sportsplex, and I know that they said, it's going to save us a sheet of ice, and, and I'm just thinking of that continuity of what you were talking about, having it in one area. It's in one area, not in one building. But it just, I guess that's one of those transparency things that I look at that I'm going, if the core committee was not aware of that sheet of ice, and this really isn't addressed to you, but that I'm just, I'm really disappointed in the executive committee that the core committee was not part of that conversation. And so, Kevin, I appreciate you bringing that up. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens if the Sportsplex doesn't come through next time. Then are we going to get another, now we need one sheet of ice or two sheets of ice and we're going to have a smaller pool. So, and honestly, I don't know why I'm looking at you because it's really not directed at you.
No, but I will
anyway,
clarify
yeah,
something
yeah.
there.
So thank you.
Go ahead, Desi.
So just to be clear on a few key points, and if anybody else wants to weigh in on, I think the way the process went. So my job is to facilitate the process here, and we had two key groups involved in this, the core team and the executive team. The core team was really intended, the core team is to be this wider, larger group to gather as much input as we possibly can from different perspectives in order to shape the facility. And then the process is such that the core team effectively makes a recommendation to the executive committee, and then they are the decision-making group for moving the process forward. So just that's the structure of how this works. And I mean, there's nothing to hide. It was a transparent process, but that's just kind of technically the way we set it up from the beginning. And the final, there's been so many iterations now, it's making me go back and make sure I have all my facts through the meetings, right? But the final recommendation came from the core team following these meetings, the last time we were here, that it was heard and there was a lot of discussion around the 50-meter pool. That was the shift. That was the shift that occurred in the program from the 25-yard to the 50-meter pool. And it was discussed at length. We had Billings Aquatic representatives talking about what is the impact, what can we host, understanding it is expensive, it's more expensive to build and it's more expensive to operate. And ultimately decided this was a decision that they heard from you all and moved forward with a 50-meter pool. And then there's been this continual iteration of one or two sheets of ice, and everybody agrees 2 sheets of ice is better, a 50-meter pool is better, more courts is better. And at some point, decisions have to be made around making sure that we achieve program opportunities for all of these different groups and check that box, but we can't overbuild. We can't basically price ourselves out of building anything. And so the remaining question was 1 sheet of ice versus 2. And the decision then was brought to the executive committee. There was a lot of discussion about 1 versus 2. And the decision from the executive committee was we think that the most attainable facility from a cost perspective is to do the 50-meter pool and the 1 sheet of ice, because a second sheet of ice could be built later. So when thinking about the phasing, 50-meter pool cannot be expanded. That was feedback we heard from you all as well. Hey, we can't expand that later. We can add additional components to that. So that decision was brought to the executive committee. Paralleling all of that, recently a conversation was brought forth about this additional ice sheet at the Sportsplex. That is not a part of the scope of this work. It just happened to run kind of concurrent. So I just want to be clear that we've not, that I can't really speak regarding that, other than it does have an impact when you zoom out and look collectively as a community. It's a less expensive opportunity to add a second sheet of ice, and therefore, well, that seems like it could be a win. 2 sheets of ice is ideal. Revenue generation, programming, everything that comes with 2 sheets of ice is a win and should be considered from the community perspective. And this idea of, hey, we could fit it into this Sportsplex came forward, and it's been what I would say kind of this peripheral conversation that has not impacted the program of this, but it's a benefit that would potentially occur. Again, unrelated but parallel.
Okay, thank you. And just for anybody in the public who might not have been following this process, the executive committee is a smaller group, but they participate in all of the core committee discussions. So they're overlapping, sort of a subgroup, but they had recognized when this was set up, you need ultimately somebody who can make the decisions.
Correct.
And so that's, call it the executive committee, might be another terminology. That's how it works. So, Chris, you were on the executive committee and you participated in all the core committee meetings, so thank you very much. Council, are we ready to take a break and move on to item number 2? I see some nods, so that's what we'll do. Just to repeat to everybody in the core committee, our consultants, Dusty, great job, a lot of work. If members of the public are watching this and they want to read this report, I assume it's posted on the Parks Department website would be the easiest place to get it. The council agenda was in it. And do we know that it's on the city's website?
They were going to post it if it's
Now it
not.
soon will be. So, okay, so look there for it, and we'll continue this discussion. Okay, thank you very much. We'll take a break now. It is 7:51. We'll be back by 8 o'clock. Would you tell her that we've? Next item up is item number 2, Park Operations Development Tools, which, as I said before, it's been a great discussion what we've had, but it's only part of a much larger problem. So here to give us that good news and go through all of that is our Parks Director, Mike Whitaker. Mike.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Parks and Rec is always good news.
Okay.
It establishes a quality life.
Amen. Preach it, brother.
Well, this is the third of 4 presentations on park funding. This presentation will highlight park operations and development tools. The City of Billings has an incredible opportunity to chart the course for the Parks and Recreation Department into the future. Billings founders had the foresight and aspiration to build large community parks like Pioneer Park, South, and North that have benefited generations of citizens and still play a major role in providing the quality of life today. Additionally, the city has grown a robust recreation division that provides hundreds of opportunities for citizens, both young and old, to enjoy. With the city's continued growth, we have the chance to build a parks and recreation system that will continue to make Billings an incredible place to live for current and future generations. One of the 22-23 City Council strategies and priorities is to increase parks, trails, recreation, and culture investments. As everyone knows, the mission of the department is to provide accessible, safe, and quality parks, facilities, open spaces, and recreational opportunities for all. The first of 3 funding problems Billings Parks and Recreation faces is that current funding levels are below a typical Parks and Recreation agency in the United States. And a lot of that comes from, we have quite a few parks that are not fully developed, and we have some parks that need to be developed. The second of 3 problems is that there is no adequate funding mechanism for new parkland, trail, and recreation facility development. Until the completion of the first phase of Centennial Park in 2021, the last community park was built was Castle Rock Park in the early 80s, and which I'm happy to say that the playground project is progressing on. It's something that I would encourage everyone just to drop by. It's gorgeous. Areas of potential new development includes a community recreation center, trails, a West End reservoir, and parkland acquisition. This map shows all the lands managed by the Parks and Recreation Department, and I think everyone's heard me make the statement that we manage over 10% of the lands in Billings. This map shows all major city and county parks. The parks in red are operated by the county and a nonprofit organization. As you look up there on the left, you can see Zimmerman Park, that's operated by the county, and Two Moon Park. And up your right-hand corner, Dover Park, that's operated by the Yellowstone River Parks Association. What's really good about this map, it shows that we're really touching almost every location in Billings. The parks in red are our completed community parks, and the 6 parks in yellow are the community parks that has not been completed or developed. Just to highlight the parks that has not been developed yet is Cottonwood Park, and with the new lake coming on, there's a great opportunity for a reservoir park there. And the 4 parks that are partially developed would be Poly Vista, Centennial Park, Castle Rock Park, and Colson Park. And the 5 red areas up there are community parks that are fully developed. That's Rose Park, Optimus Park, North and South Park, and Pioneer Park. The third of 3 problem is that the Park District 1 is set to expire at the end of the calendar year 2024 and will result in a roughly a $3.3 million reduction to the department's annual budget, representing around 29% of our overall budget. Billings Parks and Recreation's current funding comes from 5 different sources. As you can see up here, they come from general fund, individual PMDs, fees and charges, and Park District 1, and Park Special Funds. Park Special Funds are smaller funds like Dillard Park maintenance funds. We just wrapped them all together. But those are the 5 sources of revenue for the Parks and Rec Department. This slide shows how we spend our money. If you look up here, and most of it is to maintain the facilities that we have. And that includes parks, cemetery, park special funds. Like I said, a lot of those dollars goes towards maintaining the park. But then we have 37 individual park maintenance district, and then we have our capital fund, which usually is made up by funding from PD1. There are 11 primary ways to fund park operations and development. The funding mechanisms are divided up in 2 groups: one-time funding and ongoing funding. One-time funding is generally used for capital improvement, and ongoing funding is generally used for operations. There are 6 one-time funding tools that can be used for park development and life cycle replacement, and 5 ongoing funding tools that can be used for operations. One-time funding tools include bonding, donations, cash in lieu, special improvement districts, general fund reserves, and grants. Ongoing funding tools include special districts, general fund, dedicated parks and recreation operating levies, donations, user fees, and charges for services. General obligation and revenue bonds can be used for capital improvement. General obligation bonds must be approved by voters, and it's the cheapest way to borrow money for the city. Revenue bonds do not need to be approved by voters, only the governing body, but you will have to identify a funding source to pay back those bonds. Donations. It is possible to obtain a one-time fund. It is possible to obtain one-time funding through donations, but we may not be able to address the identified needs in the order that the city sees as a priority. Generally, when people donate funds to the city, they donate it for a specific purpose, which is usually a great purpose, but it's
A bathroom. Right there. That's a private bathroom.
You know, Mayor Cole, I always use this photograph because I love that restroom flying in to Swords Park. And you're right, that bathroom was paid for with donated funds.
From a lot of desperate people. Go ahead.
That's a revenue stream.
Well, completing capital projects with donations is also challenging. Using donated funds, we still have to utilize the city's procurement policy to move forward. And sometimes that develops challenges in managing projects, but it's still doable.
Mike, could I ask you to just go back to that really quick? I just can't help but chime in. My experience tells me that imagine how much more money the city could have donated for great projects in the community if they weren't raising money to pay for bathrooms, but instead were raising money to pay for amenities, and that the government were funding the core infrastructure, and arguably a bathroom is one of those. And that's not to say, that's not an appreciation for those who donated that, but I think that's a serious policy conversation for you all as to what is our role and what should we look to the public for. And again, you know Billings far better than most you represent, but that's what I've seen in the past is people get really excited about donating for things they're really passionate about, not things they're desperate for. Thanks.
Good point. Go ahead, Mike.
Mayor Cole, since we're talking about restrooms, I got to bring up a funny point that when I first arrived in Billings, we did a needs assessment in Billings, and restrooms was identified as a top need in Billings.
Okay. I don't think it's changed.
Yeah.
We're making progress.
Yeah, a little bit.
Well, cash in lieu is usually not the primary funding source for projects. It also can take decades to build up enough funds to assist with park development. A good example of that is Centennial Park. We were able to use, I think, almost all the cash in lieu funds out in that area, and that totaled $460,000. But we have been collecting cash in lieu in that area since 1950, roughly in the 50s. So I'm not discrediting that $460,000 is not a lot of money, but it took the city several years to build that up. Special improvement districts are usually used to develop small neighborhood parks and newer subdivisions that have waivers of protest. Yellowstone Family Park is a good example of a neighborhood park that was developed with a special improvement district. Most older subdivisions don't have waivers of protest, and that causes a challenge in trying to get a neighborhood park developed. General fund reserves can be used to develop parks, but projects would have to compete with other city departments' projects. A good example of when general fund revenues were used to develop a park, Centennial Park, $2 million of general fund dollars went towards the development of Centennial Park. But that's the first time in my career with Billings I saw general fund funds to go towards the development of park. Most grants require matching funds, limited in availability, and require staff time to write and administer. For example, the Land Water Conservation Fund Grant Program requires a 50% match. And I think as of a couple weeks ago, when City Council approved the amendment to the LWCF contract to build the tennis courts at Central Park, pushed us up to roughly around $1 million, which we were able to leverage because we had PD1 funds. So I'd like to add that the tennis court reconstruction also includes 4 dedicated pickleball courts. Ongoing funding tools include special districts, general fund, dedicated parks and recreation operating levy, donations, user fees, and charges for services. Like I stated before, roughly 43% of our existing budget comes from the general fund. Well, the city could continue using the general fund or pass a dedicated parks levy to fund the Parks and Recreation Department. Currently, like I said, approximately 43% of the department's budget comes from the general fund. A vote of the people would be needed to provide a specific mill levy to fund Parks and Rec. We currently charge for use of Parks and Recreation programs. We have a department policy as it relates to rec programs that the restoration fees has to cover all direct costs of the program, and the funding for staffing comes from the city. The city's special assessment district, Park District 1, like I said, funds 29% of the department's funding and will sunset December of '24. Reauthorization of this district must be voter approved. 11% of the Parks and Recreation Department comes from PMDs. And when you add that with PD1, our 40% of our budget comes from special assessment districts. Key questions to consider. How do we fund and what level of services is operations and maintenance funded? How do we adequately fund the development of parkland, trails, and recreation facilities? How do we place the funding from Park District 1, which is set to expire December 24? Other key questions to consider. What is the community's priority for new development? What level of service for maintenance and operation does a community want to fund? And what is the community's vision for quality of life in Billings? This was the third of 4 presentations. Our next presentation will bring back a recommendation on how to move forward. Just like to highlight a conversation I had with Mayor Cole this afternoon about maybe what my preliminary thoughts are of what projects to move forward with. And I'll touch on why we believe these are the top projects, but it's council's role to determine what projects we move forward with. But when you look at Castle Rock Park, Colson Park, and Poly Vista Park, we already have master plans, city council approved master plans for those parks, which they are no more than 8 years old. And as relates to the master planning process, that really includes a lot of community engagement. So the master plan really reflects what the council or what the community would like to see developed at those parks. So those parks are ready to go as soon as we would get a green light to move forward. We also have 2 other parks, Cottonwood Park and the Reservoir Park. We do not have completed master plans for those parks, but we're in the process of moving forward with a master plan effort for Cottonwood Park. And we hope to have a completed council-approved plan within the next 3 to 6 months. And that'll give us good numbers in determining what will cost to develop Cottonwood Park. Been in conversation with Public Works several times. regards to the Reservoir Park. And the number that's been tossed around is roughly around $6 million. But these are projects I think we're ready to move forward with if there was funding. And like I stated, staff will come back on December 21st with a recommendation for council to look at to determine how we move forward. And I also I think everyone knows Mike Pigg, our park superintendent, Corey Thompson, rec superintendent, and Mark Jarvis, our park planner, to answer any questions council might have.
Okay, thank you. We had questions down there before. Well, let's start down here and work this way. Councilor Rupsis?
Well, I was hoping not to start this one, but I'll go ahead. Mike, thank you for these presentations. It's been, I think, useful. I'm going to try to continue in my vein of trying not to get too excited and sticking with the skeptical side of things tonight. I think one of the big challenges that we have when we talk about parks funding is we're in a very different position than we were a couple years ago or last year when the CPSM reports came out. Those reports identified specific ways that the police and fire departments could operate more efficiently. So that we could go out to the public and say, look, these are the things that we're doing to operate more efficiently. We also need your help in adding some resources to the department. And I've heard a lot of people say, you know what, we should do that same thing for the Parks Department. And what I tell them is we've done that. We did that in 2017. We have a comprehensive plan for the department that has a whole list of recommendations to both improve the operation efficiencies of the department, as well as things where the public needs to come along and help us with funding. The only thing that report didn't give us was a nice bulleted list from 1 to 102 like they did for the police, or 1 to 37 like they did for the fire, whatever those numbers were. So, you know, Mike, I think this falls on you, that we should have had that bulleted list. And what I would recommend you do is before we come back with number 4 here, we go through that plan and pull out all those key findings and recommendations and say, this is what we've done in the last 5 years. This is what still has to be done. And this is where we need the public to come along and help us. Because it identified things like staffing shortages relative to best practice surface levels. It identified things like needing to have a pricing strategy that's more than just we try to cover our direct costs, right? They laid out a very specific recovery model and said our fees are probably too low. And we all understand the need to support people in the community that need help to participate. We want high participation, but we need to have a recovery model that works for us. So our fee strategy has not been addressed since then. I think when we look back at the different types of things that you mentioned that we could do, or some of our revenue sources, donations was high on the list. And I haven't seen a lot of strategy out of the Parks Department and how we engage the Parks Foundation to really drive that private side of things. We had a great fundraiser last week, and thank you for coming, and Mark, thanks for coming, and Mayor Cole, thanks for your donations, and Chris, you and your staff, or Kevin, I guess, actually, getting there. But years ago, we should have been using that foundation to really help us drive in a strategic kind of way to drive community engagement. The cash in lieu, we had to, thinking back to the Centennial Park, we had to drag it out of the department, how much money we had in cash in lieu for that. And we still don't have a good handle in a regular reporting on how much we have and we can use at which parks. We just had Castle Rock Park where, you know, how are we going to fund this stuff? And out of the blue is, you know, somebody had to suggest, well, why don't we use cash in lieu for that? Or why don't we use cash in lieu for a restroom at High Sierra Park? Right? These are things that I think we haven't done as a leadership in our department to put those plans in place before we have to go ask the public for more money. PD1 has been plagued by a lack of transparency. Projects that drag on a long time without good communication with stakeholders. That doesn't do much to improve our the trust that the community has in our department, that we're actually using the monies that we have well. And I believe we do a great job maintaining our parks. Mike, this is, you know, we've got great parks. I love going to our parks. They look beautiful, especially this time of year. But we need to be better and more transparent at that before we ask for money. So again, I'm just gonna leave it at that. I really think that before we come back with that fourth bullet that you've got there, I would recommend you take the time to go through that master plan and develop that list of bullet points. It's not 107 like the police had, but it's probably more like 37 or 40 like the fire department had. But they're very valuable, and we need an update on those, and we need that before we go and ask for more money. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Boyette?
Thank you, Mayor. We were talking earlier about Amen Park, what a great place that is. But I guess my question is, I used to hunt antelope where Castle Rock Park is. I watched them build that. But why don't we finish the park before we move? Why do I want to put Cottonwood Park involved if I can't finish the park with 30,000 people in the Heights? I guess that was my main question I've had since I started on the council. Why don't we finish the one park before we move to the next park? Good question. Thank you, Mike.
Councilmember Boyette, all I'm doing is pointing out the needs. It's this council's role to determine what parks we focus and what we develop. So if that's council's top priority is to finish those three parks, we can do it.
Councilmember Pearson? Councilmember Treaky?
I just wanted to say I'm really looking forward to our next conversation.
The one that has the price tag on it.
The one that shows us how we're paying for the price tag. This was the price tag.
Yeah. Well, actually, doesn't have a price tag. You don't have a number for us, right? We'll be getting that in November, I guess. Prioritization and approximate numbers, I assume.
Yes, Mayor Cole.
Okay. Just to point out a couple things, you had an acquisition element as one of, in addition to the West End Reservoir Project and what I call the C parks. They all conveniently seem to start with C's. I think it's really an important element because if I remember right, and I haven't been around that long, only 30 or a little over 30 years, I don't remember the city of Billings ever buying any parkland of any size. I'm sure there's a little piece here or there that we've had to accumulate for one purpose, one reason or another. But can you remember any time when the city of Billings in the last, call it half century, maybe the last century, has paid for parkland?
Well, Mayor, the only thing I can remember that we paid the back taxes on a third of Norm's Island to bring that into city ownership. And that's the only thing I can recall as relates to city acquiring land.
Okay. And I just say for the public, realize we're talking about land that we already have but isn't developed. But I think it's not sensible to think that we're not going to have to some point actually acquire land, especially environmentally sensitive land, important land along the rims, top of the rims, below the rims, where those critical trails are. The other thing I'll just kind of point out is I really appreciated your including the county parks in red on your map. And what's significant about that is none of them are really maintained by the county. You know, again, for the public, people need to know there is no such thing as a county parks department. And so if we ever get out there and we have to acquire these pieces, they have not been maintained by the county, and they show it. Yellowstone River Park Association does an amazing job. We really are indebted to them, but there is no county parks department. And I guess that's not likely to change. That's a comment, not really a question, Mike, but just saying the obvious on that. We'll keep on going down this way. Councilmember Troy.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I would just wanted to, I think slide number 12 has park operations and development tools, and you've got a little pie chart. Where does the money come from? I think that's slide number 12.
Oops.
Yeah, back one. There, right there. And it says 37 individual PMDs, 1.2 million, 11% of that entire pie. Of that 11% of that pie, can money be taken from those PMDs to be spent anywhere else?
Councilmember Joy, no, all dollars that are assessed people in that PMD has to stay in that PMD, and it can only be used for maintenance, not park development.
So when we look at that pie, 11% of that is very restricted. Not only is it restricted by where it can be spent, but what it can be spent on. So when you look at that pie, imagine that 11% really not doing a lot if you considered programming for all the parks throughout the city. Thank you.
Okay, Councilor One.
Thanks, Mayor. Mike, where are we on getting that list of properties that is owned by the city for which there's no development plan, they're not developable lands, that's sort of surplus parkland?
Councilmember Owens, I know Andy is working on it. The Parks Department has provided that list to Andy, and he's pulling everything together.
Okay. And then I just sort of want to echo at least one of the concerns brought up by Councilmember Rupsis with regard to donation. We lost a donation to Castle Rock Park because of the frustrations in working with the existing infrastructure for giving donations to the park. And that's significant. It's not just the money that was lost, but the community feeling like when they want to give, they can't give, and it's too hard and it's too expensive, and that funds are not prioritized for the park that they donate it to. So I don't think we're anywhere near where we need to be in bringing the community in, bringing businesses or nonprofit entities who want to sponsor things in the park. And I mean, we lost money at Castle Rock, and that was a bitter pill to swallow for us. So just wanted to echo that concern about really beefing up our donation approach.
Thank you, Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll echo what Tom had to say again. Tom, agree 100% with you on that. And I'll, in fact, Jennifer, on this too, as well as the donations, I don't think we utilize our donation avenue enough, and I think it's because the community doesn't really have confidence in the way we accept and receive the donations. And I have to say, when Jennifer was the task force chair, it didn't take very much for her to get community support and donations. She went out and talked to them. They were excited about it, and they gave. But then to find out we lost one of those, it's really disappointing, because that just tells us that, we can go out and ask all we want, and the community's willing to give. But if we don't have a plan, if we don't have a process in place to really move that money forward, then we're just spinning our wheels even asking for it. And as to the efficiency aspect and I've been on this for years, we ask about the fees, the coverage ratio on this, and Tom, I'm glad there's a formula in there to talk about this. But the idea of paying direct costs, again, I've said this before, if you have a class, if you have an association going on, the staff is part of the direct cost. The administration is part of the direct cost of those programs. Those should all be not just covered, but in some, as we heard earlier tonight, some recreation opportunities can more than pay for themselves, and others maybe have a little bit of lost leadership. But I think the Parks Department needs to run much more efficient before we start asking for a lot more money when we find out that we're losing donations and we're not paying for the services we're providing now. And then we're going to go ask for, $900 and $2,000 additional loss to add on top of what we're already losing. And so knowing that the efficiency rate, what the consultants have said that, I'm assuming they're basing it on good standards, and we're not there yet. We're not there in our own departments as far as the standards of what we have to charge for our services now. So I encourage us to really review the department, find out what we need to do to get, the amount of money being covered by our recreational facilities up to help pay for some of that. So that's all I've got to say, but thank you. I mean, it is a good presentation. I look forward to having good meetings about what is to next as far as how we can raise funds for parks, because I think parks are part of the community, but we have to have a community behind us on that.
Thank you. Councilor Gillett.
I don't think I have anything other than just I'll look forward to the fourth installment and maybe some of the work to be done in advance of that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We'll open it for public comment and then come back. Not that I know of, but maybe Kevin can say, okay, no. Okay, thank you for checking on that. we'll come, let's have public comment, and then we'll just throw it back to council for anything in the way of sort of final wrap-up. So this is your opportunity for public comment. Mr. Nelson, you know the routine.
Kevin Nelson, 4235 Bruce Avenue. I got to give credit where credit's due. Your city administrator made the comment about possibly moving outside of the city during the rec core committee meeting, moving into School District 2's levy district to fund some of these issues. Maybe you could develop a more of a regional park. These are regional parks. These are city parks that will fund by the city, but these regional parks are going to be funded on a broader basis. And that could, like I said, extend out into the School District 2 levy district. I don't even know if that's possible. Might want to look at it. A previous comment about the person wanting to move because if we build a rec center, they'll come. Oh, yeah. So there's a radio show Aaron Flint has on Monday in the morning, Montana Talks. Well, he had a Montana officials was on, and they were talking about this. How they've got people that are moving in to Montana from these other states because of the competitiveness of these larger cities. I mean, the kids just don't get to play sports. And I don't know if you've ever had kids in sports, but it's pretty dedicated. I mean, when I was coaching, if I didn't play him at shortstop, that was going to ruin his career, and he was never going to be a major league shortstop player. Yeah. And so, well, right now. So, but I mean, I'm serious. I mean, these are dedicated parents, and they want their kids to play. And if there's an opportunity for them to come to Billings to have a facility like that, there's going to be a general, they're going to show up. But one of the issues with your funding, I recall South Park, the spray part of that park, I think it had to get bid twice, and I think the first time we got no bids, and we finally had to go to an out-of-state bid because there just wasn't anybody no one locally wanted to bid it. And so is that a problem? Are we too rigid, too regulated? Are we pushing these costs up because of our, and you got to protect the taxpayers, and I get it, but is there a line we can maybe get a little better pricing? I don't know. It might be something to look at. I know you made a comment about your local option sales tax. Well, that's okay. But back to Aaron Flint this morning had Evelyn Plyron from the Biz Guy Business Journal on. Montana is very high when it comes to our property tax system and why people are moving to this state. And that's because of the property tax system. You put a local option sales tax or a sales tax in, they're going to say, what the hell I want to move up there for? I already got one of them here. Why would I want to go get one of them up there? So there's a fine line there too. I mean, how do you entice these people to come into a tax-friendly state and still fund your programs? I mean, there's some issues there, but at the same time, you don't want to be seen as a tax state that is hard on the people that show up, because they're going to move other places. So, thanks.
Thank you. Any other public comment? And there's nobody online, I believe, and no one's coming forward, so we'll close the public comment period. Back to general questions or comments. I'm going to just ask Mike one, and I apologize, I don't know the answer to this, but our existing fee structure, is there a distinction between city residents and non-city residents, since, as your map indicates, we are the county parks? And that would be a differential in fees would be critical for the rec center, but are we already doing that in our recreation programs and those other things where we do charge?
Mayor Cole, we do not. Usually a better way to word that is, are we giving Billings residents a discount?
That's a good way to put it. Sure. And are we? It sounds like we're not.
No, we're not. Several times that we've pushed forward with fee increases. There's been some discussion at the council level regards to a discounted fee structure, but it never went any farther. But back to Councilmember Rupus's comment, we definitely do need a fee policy that it would help simplify adjusting our fees every year. But yes.
And I guess for the rec center conversation and this too, it'd be nice to start seeing numbers of what the actual costs are per person, so that we could go to the county perhaps and say, this is the actual cost, and we're going to look to find a way to recoup more of those costs from people who do not pay property taxes in the city. Where are you guys, Councilmember Prince and Councilmember Tricky?
Well, this was just a comment, whenever you made the comment that the county does not maintain their county parks, that this goes right back to community involvement, and I believe Dover Park has a very, very active Dover Park Association. I think it's YRPA.
YRPA.
So they maintain this park, and they do a nice job. It's still, they're always working on it, and it's a nice park. So, I think there are associations, individuals that are interested in helping with our Parks Department. And as I look at the map and where we are going west, so many of the subdivisions, they have pretty nice neighborhood parks. So that's where I'm not concerned about the huge regional park. Sorry, Mr. Mayor, but because they have parks, and for them to travel to go to a regional park, I don't know. It's interesting to me to see what the flavor is with the citizens. I haven't visited with too many about it, but.
Councilmember Puritan, there's a difference between a neighborhood park and a regional park, and and neighborhood parks has different amenities than a regional park. So there are major differences.
Councilmember Tricky and Councilmember Joy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. I just wanted to make the following comment. Donations are not free. It takes people on staff in order to figure out how to pull those things together. It takes people on staff in order to figure out what to do with those money. It takes staff people to figure out how to get those donations and pull them in. And honestly, I've said, the mayor has said that we need a development officer. I totally agree with that. I've had conversations with parks in the past, and I fully believe that they need like a business development type of person in order to deal with a lot of these types of things. Donations are not free. And if we want to have a system in place so that we can pull in more donations, we need to fund the people who will do the work to make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Joy?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I just happened to pull up the Parks Comprehensive 2017 plan, and there's some very interesting reading in here. I think I should read even further. One of the suggestions that was made in the report for efficiencies was something that the Parks Department came forward with an ask during a budget cycle, I believe 2019, which was to allow the Parks Department to have places where they can store equipment and pick up equipment and use it to reduce windshield time. And that is one of the suggestions that is in here. We ask our Parks Department to go from Phipps Park to Lake Elmo and take equipment that far, unload it, and load it back on. The city is very spread out, and a consequence of that is inefficiency. There's a tremendous amount of inefficiency in having to pull equipment all the way from Lake Elmo to Phipps Park in order to do that. That's exactly the kinds of efficiencies that I think we need to address. And one of the other things that it mentions in here is that the Parks Division it tells how many FTEs it is, and they suggest that staffing levels are deficient by at least 5.5 FTEs in order to meet the staffing requirements for best practice staff levels. This does not consider maintenance in undeveloped parkland or natural lands, which require lower levels of maintenance but still require staff time. There's a tremendous amount written in here about efficiencies. they can't achieve efficiencies if we're not on board understanding what it takes to make those efficiencies. So thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else in the way of comments on this item? I think, Mike, anything you want to offer before we wrap up item number 2?
Yes, Mayor Cole, as we think about adding or developing new parks, we also need to think about how we're going to have to fund park maintenance to keep up with new development. So when we think about developing, say, Cottonwood Park, that means equates to we've got to bring additional staff on to help maintain it. So always keep that in the back of your head. When we develop something, we got to maintain it.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much, Mike, and to your whole staff. We appreciate what you do. And we'll look forward to getting some numbers and more specifics on this in November at the 21st, November 21st meeting. Okay, that concludes then item number 2. Item number 3, sort of a look forward. Chris, anything in the way of future agenda you want to give us a heads up on? And I think you had an agenda change coming up, right, that's relevant to all of us?
Yeah, so one fair amount of confusion we'll try to clear up tonight is we did have a meeting this morning between staff and key stakeholders in the rec center, what's the term I want to use here? Sportsplex purchase. And out of that meeting essentially was a recognition that next Monday we're not in a position to have a really healthy conversation about what to do with this opportunity. And we were very candid, just to be clear, as staff, that the memo that's in your packet, and the reason one of the primary reasons the staff recommends against the purchase is this is not, we see this as a major distraction from the conversation and the hundreds of thousands of dollars and all the work that's gone into the multi-generation rec center. That being said, if this is truly an opportunity, it needs to come to this table with a whole lot better coordination and dialogue between, I would say to a degree, the core committee and others who've been working on this rec center concept. So bottom line is, at the end of that meeting, their ask was pull it from the agenda. Well, it was already out. So the packet got sent out to the public and to you before we had that conversation. And so you'll see it in your packet, item number 4. At least the conversation this morning from them was, Chris, we would respectfully ask it to be removed from the agenda because we're not really ready to have that conversation yet. So you'll see that there. All the materials there. It's there for you and the public to review. But I would concur. I don't see a positive outcome there with the lack of clarity as to where this fits in to this overall picture. So
Chris, on that, will you be distributing a revised agenda, or come that meeting, will we need to have a vote to delete item number 4, or at least ask the council if they want to do that? You don't have to answer that. I just want to highlight that issue.
I'm just going to say it now. For the sanity of my staff, I'm going to ask that we take a vote at the beginning of the meeting to remove it from the agenda, just so we don't have to go through the work of pushing an agenda out there to the public. And we wouldn't have changed. There's nothing bad in there, so it'll be out there to the public. But I'd ask, with all on our plate, that we just start the meeting with removing it, assuming nothing changes between now and Monday where the group wants to do something different.
Okay, thank you. On that topic, Councilmember?
Yeah,
please.
Mayor, I think, we're well ahead of the deadline for posting the agenda. And for us to advertise something that we now a week ahead of time, the applicant's asking us to remove it, I think it should be removed because you have people who are going to come to the meeting and then the first thing we do is remove it and then they're going to have to leave. I think if we know that they don't want to discuss it, I think we're well ahead of time to just have it removed from the agenda. I don't see a reason why to keep it on there.
Can I potentially add this component? It came as a recommendation of the Suburra board. So in fairness, the conversation that a small group of staff had with a small group of them was not the full Suburra board. So
Okay.
they're, you know, I mean,
Okay,
there is
I'm-
more to this than just this group of people, although I don't, this group of people is very passionate about getting this project done. They want to be purchasing this, but.
Okay, so it wasn't the applicant asking to have it removed?
Who's the applicant?
The Suburra board.
It was the Suburra board, right?
It was key members of the Suburra board who were meeting to have this discussion about where, you know, where do we go with a staff recommendation that says, that recommends against, and we're recommending for. So I don't want to overstate it or understate it. That's just kind of the, where it went when the packet went out to the public this morning. And it's already out there. I mean, the packet was printed and it's out. It can be retracted. It can be changed. It happens. We do it from time to time, but it's.
Okay, so it's already posted, sort of that cat has left the bag. On the Suburra board, just a heads up, my understanding is that they will be having in-person meetings starting in November. That was an issue. They were still meeting by Zoom, which would be inconsistent with the policy that we had talked about. So my understanding is that they will be doing a hybrid version that includes in-person. They will be meeting in person starting in November. I think I was told that by somebody. So I don't remember who exactly, but I think that's what's happening on that. And also, I would encourage on the Sportsplex, Chris, and unless the Sportsplex is DOA, and I hope it's not, then we could have tours. And I know Jim Tevlin tried to arrange some tours. Councilor Boyette and I did one, maybe some of the rest of you did. I really don't think that this group is qualified to make any judgment about it unless they actually have seen the facility. So I would encourage the Suburra board, city staff, whoever, to put together a tour or tours, and I would encourage council members to participate in that. But
The rest of your agenda is land use. Sorry, the rest of your agenda, there are two other items for next Monday night. They're both land use related. One's an annexation and development, the other's a zone change, so pretty consistent with a growing community.
okay, Councilmember Roy?
Chris, can you let us know what your plans are to talk about Lake Elmo Road?
Yeah, so just this afternoon, the report came out from Debbie, from Public Works and Debbie to see that. So our intent would be to let folks digest this and figure out where we need to go as far as the public conversation, whether it's a work session that we discuss at ASAP, how much work can get done through general dialogue. So I haven't had a chance to read it yet. She did push it out to you guys this afternoon. And so.
I just don't want us to lose.
Absolutely.
This, because it's starting to look like we're not going to do it anytime soon, and so I'm concerned about that. I had asked Debbie, and I'll just ask again, I'd like to see some cost estimates as to what it would cost to do those things, but some of them seem no cost, like we could do them very soon, and so I don't want us to lose sight of this. I also just want to make sure, and you guys can clarify in writing later, that the Station 8 was factored into these assessments.
Okay.
Councilmember Pearson.
And along with that Lake Elmo Road discussion is that now there are other areas in town that are also having, you know, kids and speeding sort of issues. Well, not sort of, they are. So, you know, I keep sending these to planning and to Elise that I think if we can start having some really solid discussions on what their recommendations are and what those priorities are and what can the public actually do? Because I tell parents, the ones that I've been talking with on Polly, is, you know, maybe for them to even form some sort of traffic schedule where they can be the traffic or the crosswalk guards, and for parents to take that initiative, because these projects are not going to happen quickly, any way you look at it. You know, as Mayor stated at the very beginning of the meeting, we could have, and I think even Councilman Boyette, we could have speed bumps all over the town because everyone has speeding issues. So, so I think we need to set some real priorities in our streets. especially on the safe routes to school streets.
Okay, thank you. And council, I think we've moved into the item of general council discussion, so that's how we'll treat this. Councilmember Treaky, Councilmember Neese? On Lake Elmo, okay, unless you had something on Lake.
Same issue.
Oh, you're on, back on item 3, okay, all right, let's stay there then. Okay, go ahead.
Chris, just clarification on item L. We've talked about major, land use, quasi-judicial, but the preliminary major plat, this is the time that the council, if they don't like what they see in the plat, to bring changes forward during that time. Do I understand that correctly? I just want to make sure, as we review this, that would be the time if we see something not right with the parkland or something like that, we would bring that for recommended changes during this time.
Honestly, Councilmember Neese, Mayor and Council, it's on consent, obviously. There's public comment is always an opportunity. I'll have to refresh myself specifically in preliminary major plat subdivision.
I'm sorry,
No, go ahead.
I was trying to recall from the times that we've had our meetings with, is it Jennifer? Monica.
All the teaching Monica did.
Sorry, Monica, if you're watching or if you hear about that, which I'm sure you will.
She's smiling.
Of all the teachings we had, I thought she said that in preliminaries that's the time we actually want to make sure that we make the changes. I see the mayor asking that.
Yeah.
But the final plats, they pretty much.
It's too late.
It's too late. Okay, thank you. I just want to clarify that so as I review that. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, all you can do at final plat is confirm that the conditions you set when it was a preliminary plat have been instituted.
Thank you. Thank you.
And Gina's nodding her head there, so. Okay, so I apologize where we left on Councilmember Treaky. Okay, anything else on item number 3? Okay, well, I guess we need official comment on item number 3, highlight upcoming agenda items. Is there any public comment on that item? Nope, okay, so we'll close the public comment period now on general council discussion, after which we'll have public comment on non-agenda items. Councilmember Treaky, Councilmember Purington.
So, I just got an email the other day, Friday, and I've just taken a look at it. Another piece of the solution to traffic safety, pedestrian safety, kids walking up and down Lake Elmo and all that is the community transportation safety plan, which is in its final draft form right now, and I was planning on sending it around to everybody today, and I didn't get a chance to do that, but I will send it around to you. Some important things to realize about this is that engineers, a whole bunch of different people who actually do this type of stuff for a living have been looking at the last 5 datas and came forward with a bunch of recommendations for across the community of things that we can do. There are 2 that I just want to highlight. One of them is that one of the things that we came up with is that we need to create a community organization that pays attention to this issue all the time, not just every 5 years or whenever, an accident happens, but a community organization that pays attention to this thing all the time. The other thing, and this was one of the reasons why I keep harping on public education, we need to be telling people to wear their safety belts. We need to be telling people to watch out for bicyclists and motorcycle riders and all this type of stuff. That is one of the key recommendations that's in there under each of the different categories that are there. So it will pop up in your email sometime tomorrow. It is a draft where they're looking to do the final sometime in the next month or so. But in my reading of it, I don't really anticipate any major changes or anything like that in it. So that is another piece of how we do safety on our roads.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Purington?
I just wanted to follow up on the CPACE discussion with the county, and just to move forward with it. So I need to confirm a date with Chris for the next work session, which I think was November the 8th, maybe. And then part of that component in visiting with County Commissioner Don Jones is that we could, in order to have a good understanding of what the community needs are, is to also include one or two commercial bankers, local bankers, and then also one or two commercial developers to get their understanding of what would happen, and then to invite either Seth or Adam from Helena on Zoom so that they can clarify any misconception and maybe take, I don't know, up to 40, 45 minutes in order to have that discussion to see where the county's coming from and the city. I think the county did not find any legal roadblocks to this. The concern is how much more it's going to take or put on the treasurer's office with putting those assessments on the tax bill. That's.
Okay, thank you. Chris, you want to comment on that topic?
I'm just trying to figure out, and Councilor Parent and I have talked a little bit about when to get this on and how to have that conversation. Thinking out loud with you, who should be carrying this? I mean, this is a great example of a discussion that's eating up a bunch of public resources that we don't even have clarity as to whether if the county adopts it, it's not even a question at this table. If the county doesn't adopt it, it becomes a question if you want to do it and they don't. And my speculation is predominantly in economic development. Do we want to offer this tool or don't want to offer this tool? Is this something I should be leaning? I'm tempted to lean on Big Sky Economic Development and say, if this is a tool you want us to use in our community, help facilitate this. Because when I think about public safety, when I think about the other things we're working on, frankly, it's a distraction that I don't mean to put it off as if it's not important, but there's only so much time in a day to do these things. I'm wondering if that's really where it maybe belongs, is having them help facilitate, just like potentially the subcommittee of the council and the county, to kind of hash it out and decide where are we going to go with this, making recommendations either at this table or that table. And that really doesn't require much of any staff to figure out what the policy group wants to do.
And I would just say that right now, I don't think it goes to staff at this point, and I think as policymakers, and this is something that we've talked about a lot on this council since I've been on, is how do we coordinate with the county? And this is just a small piece. And, it would have been nice if we'd done more coordination, if you will, with the county on the marijuana issue. So I just think this is an opportunity for the council and the elected officials to hash this out. Whether, I don't know what the general consensus is on this council. I haven't taken a polling on it. I think there needs to be a better understanding of what CPACE would do to this community, if it would benefit the community. And, I just think, and then we talk about our subcommittees, and now all of a sudden it's like, well, let's have someone else do it. And I think if this is a legislative type issue that we need to deal with, a policy issue, then we should deal with it.
I'll just comment. I hope that if we show a lot of interest and support for it, that the county won't see this as a way to put it out on the city, not approve it, and put it on our plate. That's a concern I have. Now I'd rather have the county just deal with it and frankly approve it. But I saw some hands down here, Councilmember Denise.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Chris, I think your suggestion is appropriate, that the BCETA take a look at this. I mean, that's kind of their mission, is to look for economic stimulus in not just the city, but the county. And so if this is something that's doing, then maybe we as a council would, direct that to be ask BCETA to look into it and bring it back to us, bring it back to the county. But that's the only way I think you're going to get county-city participation, is if it comes from the BCETA, not from the city.
And Councilor Neitz, you're not saying we wouldn't maybe still send a representative, or council members could go and participate in that, but
Sure.
not be a lead in that.
Right, I think the CETA is kind of the lead economic development arm of the county and city, and for that matter, that's kind of what their mission's been. So if this is what that is, you know, and they're the experts in that, maybe getting them to jump on board with this, I'm not sure why they haven't yet, but that's something.
Dan Brooks of the Chamber spoke in favor, but I don't remember seeing anybody from Big Sky Economic Development. I'm going to recognize Councilmember Gulick, but Councilmember Owen, did you have your hand up before? No? Okay, Councilmember Gulick.
I know with the commissioners that the Big Sky Economic Development actually has been taking the lead, and at least in the first round, there's been multiple rounds with the county commissioners. So yes, their lead staff was Tom McLean from Big Sky ED. So.
Further discussion, Councilmember Tricky?
I love the idea of us getting in a room as a board with the county, absolutely. I don't think this issue specifically comes up to the point where it's necessary for that to be the meeting. We do have the school county city meeting coming up really soon. This strikes me as a very appropriate venue for this specific conversation. I will say one other thing just about CPACE in and of itself. While I don't like the structure of what they're dealing with or how they're doing it, it has already been ratified by the legislature. It's in place, and all we can decide is whether or not we're going to enable it here in Billings and in the county. So to me, it's not a huge policy conversation.
When is that meeting, Chris? That's the city county school district?
Thursday, I think.
Oh, this Thursday? Oh, got moved to the 27th. Okay.
October 27. We got a time? Sure, we got a time. Usually they're over the lunch hour. Yep, 11:30, city county school district meeting at the Lincoln Center, as usual.
Any reason this shouldn't be part of that? Councilmember Purington, you want to comment on that idea?
I suppose it could be. I don't know how interested the school district is, and I don't know what their agenda is. I don't know who draws that agenda, draws up the agenda for that meeting.
They always ask for input from all of us as to what the agenda is, and so we could put it last on the agenda, and if there's time to have some dialogue there and whatever might happen between now and then. And I'm emailing Tom McLean and Steve Arviscow to get an update on kind of where are they at and what could they bring to the table to get this to a decision point. The intent in bringing the state here was that the state had the most information about it, and I'm pretty confident. I don't think we want Andy researching it more or us trying to figure out what the details of this are. I think we've got other things going on, so.
Okay. All right. Well, hopefully that could be added to that agenda to keep the ball moving. We're in council discussion. Anything else before we move on to public comment on non-agenda items? Okay. Public comment on non-agenda items. Mr. Nelson.
What happened at 7:30?
Oh, jeez. Yeah.
I wasn't here.
It's
Kevin Nelson, 4235 Bruce Avenue. Quickly, the steering committee, early on, Jeff Ballard said, Billings is pretty damn cheap when it comes to fees and their recreation. But my comment tonight is about the Sportsplex, and here we have some information here, Jace. So there's 90 to 95 parking spaces currently at the Sportsplex. That's the same amount at the north end of Optimus Park. You ever come down to Optimus Park during a Little League game? One senior league game, one Little League game, that parking lot's full, and now they're down the streets, and we're adding a new parking lot on the south end of the park. If you drove down there tonight, if you drove down Southgate, right in front of the Sportsplex, the street's going to be lined with oversized vehicles, semis, motorhomes, all kinds of things that have pulled off because it's so accessible, because they can pull off that interstate, get a room, they're right there, they don't need to get in the parking lot. If you were to ever conceive that Sportsplex, well, now you're going to displace all of them people that are looking for that motel room and that economic development that comes from them. A thing that I've always had it, always will have it, is, to me, there's a huge conflict of interest with that suburb board buying that sportsplex. So you have Dick Zier on the executive committee makes a motion to take the second sheet of ice out, that's a real estate agent, and then goes and executes a buy-sell for the sportsplex 2 months later. Find that a little interesting? Matter of fact, there were more Suburra board members showed up at the meeting at his office this morning that showed up tonight at the rec center meeting. And we had one board member showed up and it was 6:45 and never spoke. Where's their interest? I don't see a lot. The storm drain. You'd have to put a storm drain if they bought that little parking lot in the back. Well, that's just gonna really take away from anything. And then their new easement would go through the New Hamptons Inn storm drain retention pond, which would have to be moved. But really, if you're gonna do this, you have the authority, put some money together, hire an engineer, mechanical engineer, civil engineer, electrical engineer. Is that building even capable of even housing that type of facility? I mean, what are the costs? Now, the Suburra board says, oh, we got these costs. Well, how do you know that? We just got done with, we had a $70 million project. Now we got a $100 million project 3 months later. So I don't know. There's got to be a lot of discussion, but it really is going to come from this body. This body has to step up. If you're really concerned about it, if you really think that's an opportunity to look at that, well, it's your obligation then to pursue all of this. Another thing is 2 independent appraisals. That's what we had to have when you bought the property, and I think that's city standard that you have to have 2 independent appraisals to buy a piece of property. That has never got done. So I think there's just a lot to do here, but I think it really rests on this body to, if necessary, if really appropriate the money, get the professionals in here, let them give you some information, because there's a lot of it that needs to be had before you could even begin to start this process. Thanks.
Very good, thank you. Any other public comment on non-agenda items? No, so we'll close that, and council, thank you very much. We are adjourned.